A desperate mother, a ruthless hunter, a stranger who shouldn't care. Deep in the Montana wilderness, a woman collapses in the snow with her 5-year-old daughter screaming for help. Behind them, a powerful man who will stop at nothing to steal the child. Ahead, only frozen death. Then a reclusive stranger hears the cries and makes a choice that will shatter his isolation forever. This is their story of survival, unlikely family, and the brutal fight against a monster who believes money can buy anything, even a little girl's future. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The scream cut through the blizzard like a knife through silk. Elias Crow stopped mid-step, his hand already on the cabin door. Wind howled through the pines, throwing snow sideways across the clearing. He'd been out checking his trapline. 3 sorry rabbits and a possum that looked half-starved even before it died. Pathetic haul for 6 hours in waist-deep powder. His fingers ached inside his gloves, his beard crusted with ice. All he wanted was the fire, some coffee, maybe the bottle of whiskey he'd been rationing since October. Then he heard it again. High-pitched, raw. The kind of sound that comes from a throat too small to make it, pushed out anyway by pure terror. Mama! Mama! Wake up! Please wake up! Elias stood frozen, snow gathering on his shoulders. Every instinct he'd honed over 6 years of solitude screamed at him to go inside, bar the door, mind his own business. The frontier didn't reward heroes. It buried them alongside the fools and the careless. But that voice, Christ, that voice was a child. He dropped the rabbits in the snow and turned toward the sound, pushing into the trees. The wind tried to shove him back. Montana winters didn't negotiate. They killed what they wanted and left the rest to find the bodies come spring. Elias had seen 3 men freeze to death in his first year up here. Good men, strong men. Men who'd made one wrong turn and paid for it with their lives. Mama, closer now. Maybe 100 yards east, down where the trail curved past Widow's Drop. Nobody should be on that trail. Not in this weather. Not unless they were running from something worse than a blizzard. Elias fought through a stand of lodgepole pines, their branches clawing at his coat. His boots punched through the snow crust with each step sinking to his knees. Sweat ran down his spine despite the cold. His breath came in ragged clouds. Then he saw them. A woman lay crumpled in the snow beside what used to be a trail. Her dark hair spread around her head like spilled ink, already half buried in white. She wasn't moving. Kneeling beside her, shaking her shoulder with both tiny hands, was a little girl in a threadbare coat that might have been blue once but now looked grey as ash. Mama, please. The girl's voice cracked. You have to wake up. You promised you wouldn't sleep. Elias approached slowly, hands visible. The girl's head whipped toward him and he saw her face, tear-streaked, red from cold and crying, eyes wide with the kind of fear that aged children before their time. She couldn't have been more than 5, maybe 6. Small for her age if she'd been eating regular. She hadn't. He could tell by the hollows under her eyes, the way her coat hung loose on her frame. Stay away! The girl threw herself across her mother's body, arms spread wide like she could shield her from the world. Don't touch her! Elias stopped 10 feet back. His mind catalogued what he could see. The woman's lips were blue, her breathing shallow and irregular. Her left hand lay palm up in the snow, fingers curled slightly. No gloves, no proper winter gear at all. Just a thin traveling cloak over a dress that might have been nice once in some other life. Both of them were soaked through. They'd been out here for hours, maybe longer. I'm not going to hurt anyone, Elias said, pitching his voice low and steady. Same tone he'd used with spooked horses back when he gave a damn about such things. But your mama's in trouble. Bad trouble. We need to get her somewhere warm. No! The girl's chin jutted out. Defiant. Terrified. You'll take her away. They all want to take her away. Nobody's taking anybody anywhere except out of this storm. Elias edged closer, watching the girl's eyes. You know what happens if she stays out here much longer? The girl's face crumpled. Fresh tears cut tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. She'll die, like Papa did. Something in Elias's chest twisted, hard and sudden. He shoved it down. No time for that. Then let me help. I've got a cabin, not far, a fire, warm blankets, medicine. You're lying. But the girl's voice wavered. Maybe I am, Elias admitted, but your mama's dying right now, right here, and you know it. So you've got two choices. Trust me, or watch her freeze. What's it going to be? The girl stared at him. Wind screamed through the trees. Snow devils danced across the trail. Elias could see her trying to decide, this slip of a thing who'd probably seen more ugliness than any child should have to carry. Finally, she moved aside. Just a fraction. Just enough. Elias knelt in the snow beside the woman and pressed two fingers against her throat. Pulse was there, but weak, thready. Her skin felt like ice wrapped in paper. When he lifted one of her eyelids, her pupil reacted slowly, like it was pushing through molasses. Hypothermia. Advanced stage. She needed heat, and she needed it 10 minutes ago. What's your name? He asked the girl, shrugging out of his heavy coat. Clara? It came out barely above a whisper. Clara, I'm Elias. I'm going to wrap your mama in my coat and carry her. Can you walk? Yes. Good. Stay close to me. Don't stop, no matter what. Understand? She nodded. Elias bundled the woman in his coat as best he could, then slid his arms under her knees and shoulders. Christ. She weighed nothing. Couldn't be more than 100 pounds soaking wet, which she currently was. He stood carefully, adjusting her weight against his chest. The walk back should have taken 15 minutes. It took 40. The blizzard intensified, visibility dropping to arm's length. Elias navigated by memory and instinct, one boot in front of the other, Clara clutching the back of his shirt with both hands. Twice he lost the trail entirely and had to backtrack. Once he stumbled over a buried log and nearly dropped the woman, his knee cracking against frozen ground hard enough to make him see stars. Is she still breathing? Clara's voice came from somewhere behind his left shoulder. Elias checked. The woman's breath ghosted against his neck, faint but present. Yeah, she's still with us. Don't let her go, Clara said. Please don't let her go. Doing my best, kid. When the cabin finally materialized through the snow, Elias had never been so grateful to see his own front door. He kicked it open, nearly fell through it, and staggered to the bed in the corner. The fire had burned down to coals, but the interior was still warmer than outside. Marginally. He laid the woman on the bed and started stripping off her wet clothes with clinical efficiency. Years as an army medic had burned any sense of modesty out of him. Bodies were just bodies, and this one was failing fast. Clara hovered nearby, arms wrapped around herself, shivering violently. Go stand by the fire, Elias ordered, not looking up. There's a blanket on that chair. Wrap up in it. But, Mama? Your mama needs me to work. Can't do that if I'm worried about you freezing too. Now move. The girl obeyed, which surprised him. He'd expected more fights. Elias worked fast. Wet dress off, replaced with one of his own wool shirts that hung on her like a tent. Dry blankets piled on top. He built up the fire until it roared, then filled a pot with snow and set it to melt. Warm water, not hot. He'd seen men go into shock from being reheated too fast. The woman, Evelyn, Clara had called her once in a whisper, didn't wake. Her breathing stayed shallow, her skin waxy pale. Elias checked her pupils again, felt along her ribs for breaks, examined her hands and feet for frostbite. No breaks. Some minor frostbite on 3 toes of her left foot, nothing that would require amputation if he was careful. Her pulse had strengthened slightly, but she was burning up now. Fever replacing hypothermia as the immediate threat. Is she going to die? Clara asked from her blanket cocoon. Elias dunked a cloth in the warming water and wiped down Evelyn's face. Don't know yet. She's fighting, that's something. Mama's strong. Clara's voice was small but certain. She carried me for 3 days once when I couldn't walk. She didn't stop, not even when her feet bled. Elias glanced at the girl. She was staring at her mother with an expression too old for her face. Love and fear and a kind of desperate hope, all tangled together. How long have you two been out there? I don't know. A long time. We walked and walked. Mama said we had to keep moving because he'd find us if we stopped. Who'd find you? Clara's face shuttered immediately. Nobody. Right, Elias wrung out the cloth. Nobody. That's why you're running through a Montana blizzard in November with no supplies and no winter gear. Just out for a pleasant stroll. Mama said not to tell anyone. Clara. Elias turned to face her fully. I just hauled you both out of a storm that would have killed you in another hour. I'm currently using my own bed, my own firewood, and what little medicine I've got left, trying to keep your mama alive. So I think we're a bit past the point of keeping secrets, don't you? The girl's lower lip trembled. For a moment, Elise thought she'd cry again, but she didn't. She straightened her spine instead, lifting her chin the same way she had out on the trail. It's my uncle, she said quietly. Uncle Victor, he wants to take me away from Mama. She says he wants Papa's money, but Papa left it to me. In a will, Uncle Victor got mad when he found out and he did bad things. He told lies about Mama to judges and policemen. He said she was crazy, that she couldn't take care of me. Is she? Crazy? No! Clara's voice rose. She's the smartest person I know. She can read and write and do sums faster than anybody, but Uncle Victor has lots of money and he paid people to say Mama was sick in the head. The judge believed him, so we ran. Elias processed this rich relative custody battle, corruption. Tale as old as time, or at least as old as money itself. The frontier was full of people running from something. Debts, crimes, families, pasts they couldn't outrun no matter how far they rode. Where are you running to? Mama said Canada. She said once we cross the border, Uncle Victor's papers don't mean anything anymore. Canada's another 300 miles north, through some of the worst terrain in Montana. Winter's already here. You'd never make it. We have to try. Clara's hands clenched into fists. We can't let him find us. If he finds us, he'll take me away and I'll never see Mama again. Elias turned back to Evelyn. Her breathing had evened out slightly, but the fever still raged. He needed to get liquids into her, maybe some willow bark tea if she could swallow. The next 24 hours would tell the story. Your uncle know you came this way? I don't think so. Mama was very careful. We only traveled at night. We didn't talk to anybody except once when Mama traded her wedding ring for food and a coat that got stolen 2 days later. So he's probably still searching back wherever you came from. Clara nodded. Denver. We came from Denver. Denver to here was 500 miles, give or take, on foot, in late autumn with a child. Elias looked at Evelyn with new eyes. This woman had walked her daughter halfway across the frontier, through territories where men with guns and bad intentions outnumbered the law by a factor of 1,000 to 1. Maybe Clara was right. Maybe her mother was the strongest person either of them knew. All right, Elias said. Here's what's going to happen. Your mama's staying in that bed, until the fever breaks. Could be a day, could be 3. You're staying here too. I've got enough food for a few weeks if we're careful. Once she's well enough to travel, we'll figure out what comes next. You'll help us? Clara's eyes went wide. Really? Didn't say that. Said I'd keep you alive until your mama can make her own decisions. After that, not my problem. It was a lie, and they both knew it. The moment Elias had heard that scream, the moment he'd turned toward it instead of walking away, he'd made it his problem. That was the thing about trying to bury your humanity under 6 years of isolation and whiskey. It never stayed buried. It just waited for the worst possible moment to claw its way back up. Thank you, Clara whispered. Elias grunted and went back to work. Night fell hard and fast. The blizzard continued to rage outside, wind rattling the shutters, snow piling against the cabin walls. Inside, the fire crackled and popped. Elias made Clara eat some stale bread and dried venison, then bundled her into his spare blanket on the floor near the hearth. She fell asleep within minutes, exhausted beyond measure. Elias sat in his chair, watching Evelyn's chest rise and fall. Every so often he'd check her pulse, wipe her face with cool water, adjust the blankets, standard fever protocol, wait and watch and hope the body won. Around midnight, she started talking, not waking, just fever dreams spilling out in fragments, names he didn't know, places he'd never been. Once she cried out sharply, thrashing against the blankets, and Elias had to hold her shoulders down until she calmed. No, she mumbled, eyes still closed. Can't have her. She's mine. Mine. Easy, Elias murmured. You're safe. Nobody's taking anybody. Whether she heard him or not, he couldn't tell, but she settled back into restless sleep. He dozed off sometime before dawn, jerking awake at every sound, his hand automatically going to the rifle he'd propped within reach. Old habits. The war had ended 12 years ago, but his body hadn't gotten the message. When grey light finally filtered through the shutters, the storm had passed. Elias stood, joints cracking, and checked his patience. Clara still slept, curled into a ball like a cat. Evelyn's fever had broken sometime in the night, leaving her pale and sweaty, but breathing easier. Her eyes moved behind closed lids. Real sleep now, not fever delirium. She might actually make it. Elias stepped outside into a world transformed. Snow lay 3 feet deep across the clearing, smooth and pristine, except for the furrow he'd carved yesterday, hauling 2 half-frozen strangers to his door. The sky had cleared to painful blue. Sunlight glittered off the snow like scattered diamonds. Beautiful. Deadly. The frontier didn't do anything by halves. He was checking the trapline markers when he heard the door open behind him. Mister? Elias turned. Clara stood in the doorway, barefoot, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. You should be inside, he said. Your feet'll freeze. Mama's awake. She's asking for you. Something in the girl's voice made Elias move faster than he had in years. He pushed past her into the cabin, and there was Evelyn, sitting up in bed, looking like death's distant cousin, but very definitely alive and conscious. Her eyes found him immediately. They were grey, he noticed, storm cloud grey. You... Her voice came out rough as gravel. You're the one who brought us here. Seemed like the thing to do at the time. Clara told me about the storm, about... She swallowed hard. Thank you. I don't have anything to pay you with, but didn't ask for payment. Evelyn studied him with an intensity that made Elias want to look away, like she was taking his measure, weighing him against some internal scale only she could see. Why? She asked finally. Why help us? You don't know us. We're nothing to you. Elias considered the question. Why had he helped? Could have been a lot of reasons. Boredom, residual humanity, Some misguided notion that saving strangers might balance out the men he'd failed to save during the war. Or maybe he'd just been tired of living like a ghost, going through motions in a cabin that used to hold a family and now held only memories and regrets. Your daughter was screaming, he said instead. Seemed rude to ignore it. Most people would have. Yeah, well. Elias moved to the fire, adding another log. I'm not most people. No, Evelyn agreed softly. I don't think you are. An uncomfortable silence settled over the cabin. Clara climbed onto the bed next to her mother, tucking herself under Evelyn's arm like she'd done it 1,000 times. Evelyn's hand automatically smoothed the girl's hair, a gesture so unconscious and tender it made Elias's throat tight. He remembered that feeling. Holding his son, small and warm, before... No, not going there. You need to eat, he said, gruffly, turning away. Build your strength back up. I'll make some broth. Mr. Crow? Elias. Evelyn's voice stopped him at the stove. Clara says you know why we're running. She mentioned something about her uncle and a custody dispute. It's more than a dispute. Evelyn's voice hardened. Victor Hale is a powerful man, wealthy, connected. He owns half of Denver and most of the people in it. When my husband died, he expected to inherit everything, the company, the property, the money, but Thomas left it all to Clara in trust, with me as administrator until she comes of age. Let me guess. Uncle Victor didn't take that well. He tried to contest the will. When that failed, he started a campaign to have me declared unfit, paid doctors to say I was melancholic, hysterical, unstable. He bribed a judge to grant him temporary custody while the case was being decided. Her arms tightened around Clara. I wasn't going to wait around for them to take my daughter, so we left. In late autumn, with winter coming. We didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when the alternative is losing your child. Evelyn's eyes flashed. You can judge me if you want. Call me reckless, call me stupid. I don't care. But I will not apologize for doing whatever it takes to keep my daughter safe. Elias held up his hands. Wasn't judging, just stating facts. Evelyn looked away, jaw tight. Clara pressed closer against her side. How far behind is he? Elias asked. I don't know. We've been careful. Avoided towns, stayed off main roads, paid cash when we had to buy supplies. But Victor's persistent. He won't stop looking. And if he finds you, then we run again. Evelyn's voice was flat, final. We keep running until we cross into Canada or until... She didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Elias poured water into a pot, added some dried herbs and a piece of salt pork. While it heated, he thought about what she'd said. Rich man, custody battle, corruption. Standard story, except for one thing. Most people in Evelyn's position would have tried to fight through the courts. Hired lawyers, gathered evidence, worked within the system. The fact that she'd run instead told him everything he needed to know about how rigged that system was. How old was Clara when her father died? He asked. 3? She remember him? Bits and pieces. Thomas was... He worked a lot, building the business, but he loved her. Loved us both. Evelyn's voice softened. He just didn't realize his brother would turn into a monster the moment there was money on the table. Elias stirred the broth. Family's funny that way. Brings out the best in people sometimes. More often brings out the worst. You have family, Elias? The question hit him like a fist. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then training kicked in and he shoved it all down into the same dark hole where he kept everything else that hurt too much to look at. Not anymore, he said. Evelyn must have heard something in his voice because she didn't push, just nodded and held her daughter closer. The broth finished heating. Elias poured it into a bowl and brought it to the bed. Evelyn took it with hands that shook slightly. but she managed to drink half before exhaustion caught up with her again. "Sleep," Elias ordered. "You're safe here, at least for now." Evelyn's eyes were already closing. "Just for a few days," she murmured. "Then we'll be gone, I promise. We won't be your burden any longer than necessary." Elias didn't answer, just took the bowl and went back to the stove. Clara watched him from the bed, her small face serious. "You don't like people, do you?" she said. "What makes you say that? You live all alone in the woods. You don't smile. And you keep looking at the door like you wish we'd leave. Perceptive kid." "I'm just not used to company," Elias said. "Mama says people who hide from other people are usually hiding from themselves." "Your mama talks a lot for someone who just almost died." Clara giggled, an unexpected sound that briefly lit up the cabin's dim interior. "She says that's because she has important things to say." "I'm sure she does." "Do you have important things to say, Elias?" "No, kid, I really don't." But Clara just smiled like she didn't believe him and went back to watching her mother sleep. Over the next 3 days, Evelyn's strength slowly returned. Color came back to her face. She started sitting up for longer periods, eating solid food, moving around the cabin on unsteady legs. Elias watched her recovery with clinical detachment, noting each milestone, calculating when she'd be well enough to travel. Not because he wanted them gone. Well, maybe a little because he wanted them gone. Having people in his space again felt wrong. Like wearing someone else's clothes, everything about his routine had to change to accommodate them. Cooking times, sleeping arrangements, the simple luxury of sitting in silence without someone asking questions or needing something. But mostly it felt wrong because it reminded him too much of before. Before the fever took Sarah and little James, before he'd held his son's cooling body and screamed at a god he'd stopped believing in, before he'd walked away from medicine, from people, from every damn thing that made him human. This cabin was supposed to be where he came to forget. Except Clara kept trying to help him with everything. Gathering wood, hauling water, even attempting to cook before Elias gently steered her away from the stove. And Evelyn, despite her weakness, insisted on making herself useful, mending his clothes, organizing his chaotic shelves, bringing a kind of order to the space that had been missing for years. They were making his cabin into a home again, and he hated how much he didn't hate it. On the 4th day, Elias was outside chopping firewood when he heard hoofbeats. He dropped the axe and grabbed his rifle in one smooth motion, muscle memory from too many ambushes during the war. The cabin door banged open and Evelyn appeared, Clara behind her. "Inside," Elias ordered. "Now." "What?" "Someone's coming. Could be nobody, could be trouble. Either way, you two stay out of sight until I know which." Evelyn's face went white, but she nodded and pulled Clara back inside. Elias positioned himself at the corner of the cabin, rifle ready, and waited. A minute later, a horse and rider emerged from the tree line. Elias relaxed fractionally. Just one rider, and he recognized the horse. A big, grey mare that belonged to Hazel Redstone, the postmaster from Dry Creek. Hazel pulled up at the clearing's edge, hands visible and empty. "You planning to shoot me, Crow?" she called. "Depends. You bring bad news?" "When do I ever bring good news?" "Fair point." Elias lowered the rifle and stepped into the open. Hazel dismounted, a solid woman in her 50s with iron grey hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same granite as the mountains. "What brings you out here?" Elias asked. "Can't a woman visit an old friend?" "We're not friends." "No, but we're not enemies either, which in these parts counts for something." Hazel's sharp eyes scanned the cabin. "You got company?" It wasn't a question. "What makes you say that?" 3 sets of tracks in the snow leading to your door. You're wearing a shirt, that's been recently mended with better stitching than your ham-fisted attempts. And there's a little face peeking at me through your window right now. Elias sighed. Nothing got past Hazel. She'd spent 30 years running the post office in Dry Creek, which meant she knew everyone's business before they knew it themselves. They're just passing through, he said. Huh? They got names? That's their business. Fair enough. Hazel pulled a folded paper from her coat. Though you should know there's been a well-dressed man asking questions in town. City type, fancy coat, fancier horse. Showed up 3 days ago with 2 hired men and a photograph. Elias's blood went cold. Photograph of who? Woman and a little girl. Said his sister-in-law ran off with his niece. Said he's got court papers giving him custody, and he's looking to bring the child home where she belongs. Hazel's eyes were hard. Said he'd pay good money for information leading to their whereabouts. What did you tell him? Same thing I told everyone who'd listen. That if some city dandy thinks he can come into my town, waving money around, and expect people to sell out a woman and child, he's got another thing coming. She handed Elias the paper. But not everyone in Dry Creek shares my feelings. Thought you should know he's close. Elias unfolded the paper. It was a wanted poster, professionally printed. The photograph showed Evelyn and Clara, maybe a year ago, dressed in fine clothes, standing in front of what looked like a nice house. Above the image, reward, $500 for information. Below it, a description written by someone who knew how to make a victim sound like a criminal. Evelyn Hale, age 29, wanted for custodial interference and kidnapping. Consider dangerous and unstable. Contact Victor Hale, Denver, Colorado. Bastard, Elias said softly. That's one word for him. Hazel glanced at the cabin. Those your people in there? They're not my people, they're just... Elias trailed off. People you pulled out of a blizzard and are currently hiding from a man who's offering more money than most folks around here see in 5 years. Hazel's expression softened slightly. Elias, I know you prefer playing hermit, but this is bigger than you wanting to be left alone. That man's got resources, money, men. If he finds them here, I know. Do you? 'Cause $500 is enough to make even good people do bad things. And Victor Hale doesn't strike me as someone who stops at legal methods when illegal ones work faster. The cabin door opened. Evelyn stepped out. Clara pressed against her side. She looked at Hazel, then at Elias, then at the poster in his hands. That's him, isn't it? She said quietly. Victor, he's here. He's in Dry Creek, Hazel confirmed. About 10 miles south. So far he's been asking questions, showing that photograph around. But I'd bet my best horse he's got men out searching the surrounding area. Evelyn's face could have been carved from ice. Then we need to leave, tonight. Before... You're not strong enough yet, Elias interrupted. You'd make it maybe 5 miles before you collapsed? Then I'll collapse 5 miles from here instead of bringing trouble to your door. Too late for that. Trouble's already here. Elias looked at Hazel. How long before he expands his search this direction? Depends. Could be days. Could be hours. Hard to say. Hazel studied Evelyn with the same measuring look she gave everyone. You really kidnap your own daughter? She's my daughter, Evelyn said, lifting her chin. I didn't kidnap her, I saved her. From what? From a man who sees her as nothing but a key to a fortune he thinks he deserves? Who would raise her to be obedient and quiet and convenient? Who would erase everything about her that makes her Clara just so he can control her inheritance? Evelyn's voice shook with controlled fury. So, yes, I took her and I ran. And I'd do it again, every single time. Hazel was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded, once, sharp. Good enough for me? She turned to Elias. You know what you're getting into? Keeping them here? I'm not keeping them anywhere, just giving them time to recover. Right, and I'm the Queen of England. Hazel moved toward her horse. Listen to me, both of you. Victor Hale is staying at Miller's boarding house. He's got 2 men with him, Luther Cass and Pike something. Didn't catch the last name. Both look like the kind of men you hire when you want someone hurt. Without questions, they've been making rounds, asking about strangers, showing that photo. Most folks have kept quiet, but there's always someone willing to talk for the right price. What would you do? Evelyn asked. If you were me? Hazel considered. I'd disappear into these mountains and make it damn hard for anyone to find me. But winter's coming hard, and you've got a child. So maybe I'd find someone I could trust to watch my back while I figured out a more permanent solution. She said it while looking directly at Elias. I work alone, Elias said. No, you hide alone. There's a difference. Hazel mounted her grey mare. But it's your choice. Just thought you should know what's coming. She paused. Oh, and Elias? Jonah Briggs sends his regards. Says if you need anything, you know where to find him. Then she was gone, disappearing back into the trees the way she'd come. Elias stood in the snow holding the wanted poster, feeling the weight of the choice settling on his shoulders like chains. Who's Jonah Briggs? Clara asked. An old friend, Elias said. From before. Before what? Before everything. He looked at Evelyn. She was watching him with those storm-grey eyes, trying to read him, probably wondering if he was about to turn them out. He should. Smart thing would be to send them on their way, wash his hands of the whole mess. Victor Hale was her problem, not his. He'd already done more than most people would have. But then Clara shifted, and he saw the small wooden horse he'd carved for her during her mother's fever, poking out of her coat pocket. A stupid little thing he'd whittled to keep his hands busy. She'd been carrying it ever since. We'll leave tonight, Evelyn said, misreading his silence. I'm strong enough. We'll manage. No. Elias. No, he repeated, harder this time. You're not strong enough, you don't have supplies, and winter's about to turn mean. You head out there now, you'll be dead in a week. Both of you. Then what do you suggest? Elias looked at the wanted poster again. $500. A fortune by frontier standards. And Victor Hale clearly had more where that came from. This was going to get ugly. Probably violent, definitely complicated. He was going to regret it. We dig in, he said. Make this place defensible, prepare for company. And when Victor Hale's men come sniffing around, and they will, we make sure they leave disappointed. Evelyn stared at him. Why? Why would you risk yourself for us? It was the same question she'd asked 4 days ago, and Elias still didn't have a good answer. Or maybe he did, but it was buried so deep under scar tissue and self-imposed isolation that he couldn't quite reach it. Your daughter keeps trying to help me chop firewood, he said instead. Kid's going to lose a finger if I don't keep an eye on her. It wasn't the real answer, and they both knew it. But Evelyn smiled anyway, the first real smile he'd seen from her, and something in Elias's chest cracked open just a little. Thank you, she said softly. Elias grunted and turned away, already mentally cataloging what needed to be done. Check the weapons, inventory ammunition, set up early warning signals around the property perimeter. Jonah would help, if asked. Man was half feral himself, but loyal as they came. Don't thank me yet, he said. We might all be dead by Christmas. Clara giggled. You're funny, Elias. I'm really not, kid. But she just smiled at him. And Elias realized with creeping horror that somewhere in the last 4 days, without him noticing, these 2 strangers had stopped being strangers. He was in trouble. The kind of trouble that couldn't be solved with a rifle and a good defensive position. the kind that made you care whether you lived or died. And for a man who'd spent 6 years not caring much about either, that was the most dangerous thing of all. Jonah Briggs arrived 2 hours before sunset, appearing at the tree line like something conjured from the wilderness itself. Elias saw him first, a tall, rangy figure in buckskins and fur, leading a pack mule loaded with supplies. The man moved through the snow with the easy efficiency of someone who'd been walking these mountains since before Montana had a name. "Heard you had company?" Jonah called across the clearing. His voice carried the rough edges of someone who spent more time talking to animals than people. "Figured you might need a hand?" Elias lowered his rifle. "Hazel's got a big mouth." "Hazel's got good instincts. Same can't be said for you taking in fugitives." Jonah reached the cabin and dropped the mule's lead rope. Up close, his weathered face split into something that might have been a grin under all that beard. "Though, I suppose it's about time you stopped acting like a dead man." "I'm not," Elias started, then stopped. No point arguing. Jonah had known him since the war, back when Elias still believed saving lives mattered. "You didn't have to come." "Didn't have to. Wanted to." Jonah's eyes shifted to the cabin door, where Evelyn stood watching them. "Mom, name's Jonah Briggs, friend of this stubborn bastard, though he'd probably deny it." Evelyn Hale. She stepped into the cold, arms wrapped around herself. "And I know exactly what he'd deny. He's been very clear about working alone. He's been very clear about a lot of things that ain't true." Jonah started unloading the mule, brought flour, coffee, ammunition, some dried meat, extra blankets. "Figured if you're gonna hole up here waiting for trouble, might as well do it comfortable." Clara poked her head out behind her mother. "Are you a mountain man?" Jonah laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a slope. "Close enough, little miss. Your mama tell you not to talk to strangers?" "You're not strange. You're friends with Elias. That make me trustworthy in your book?" Clara considered this with the seriousness only children could muster. "Mama says you can tell a lot about a person by who their friends are. Elias saved us, so his friends are probably good too." "Smart kid." Jonah hauled a flour sack off the mule. "She always this sharp?" "Every damn day," Evelyn said, but there was warmth in her voice. They worked in silence for a while, moving supplies into the cabin, stacking them against the walls. Jonah had brought more than Elias expected, enough to last through a hard winter if it came to that. The kind of preparation that said he understood exactly what they were facing. When the mule was unloaded, Jonah tied it near Elias's 2 horses and came back to the cabin. Inside, Evelyn had started coffee while Clara sat by the fire, working on a drawing with a piece of charcoal Elias had given her. "So," Jonah said, settling into the chair Elias pointed him toward, "Hazel says there's a rich man in Dry Creek looking to buy information about a woman and a child. Says he's got papers and hired guns and enough money to make people forget their morals." He looked at Evelyn. "That about cover it?" "His name is Victor Hale," Evelyn said quietly. "He's my late husband's brother, Clara's uncle by blood, though he's never cared about her as anything but a means to an end. The end being money, I assume." "A great deal of it. My husband built a shipping company from nothing. When he died, he left everything to Clara in trust, with me as administrator. Victor expected to inherit. When he didn't, he decided to take it anyway." Jonah accepted the coffee Evelyn poured for him. Legal routes didn't work out. He tried, contested the will, failed, so he changed tactics, started spreading rumors that I was unstable, paid doctors to diagnose me with conditions I don't have, bribed a judge to grant him temporary custody pending a full hearing. Her hands tightened on her own cup. "I wasn't going to wait around for that hearing. We left Denver the night before Victor was supposed to collect Clara." "How long ago?" 6 weeks. We've been moving ever since." Jonah whistled low. 6 weeks on the run with a child, heading into winter. That takes guts or desperation, maybe both. Both, Evelyn admitted. I sold everything I could carry, jewelry, my wedding ring, clothes, bought passage on wagons when I could, walked when I couldn't. We slept in barns, abandoned shacks, once in a cave when a storm caught us between towns. She glanced at Clara, who was absorbed in her drawing. I know it sounds reckless, maybe it was, but I couldn't let him have her. Nobody here's judging, Jonah said. We've all done things that looked crazy from the outside. Question is, what's your plan now? Canada, originally. Cross the border, start over somewhere he can't reach us. That's another 300 miles north, through Blackfoot territory, mountain passes that'll be snowed shut in a week, and country so remote you could die and nobody'd find your bones till spring. Jonah shook his head. Not saying it's impossible, but with winter here and you just recovering from near freezing to death, the odds ain't good. I know. Evelyn's voice was barely above a whisper. I know the odds, but what else can I do? If I stay, he finds me. If he finds me, he takes Clara. The courts are his, the law is his, money buys everything in Denver, and Victor has plenty of both. This ain't Denver, Elias said from where he stood by the door, and money don't spend the same way in Dry Creek. You heard Hazel. $500 is more than most people see in years. Someone will talk. Maybe, but most folks around here got a healthy distrust of outsiders throwing money around. We don't like being bought. Elias moved to the table. Besides, even if Victor knows general area, these mountains are easy to get lost in. Plenty of places to hide. Hiding only works if you can stay hidden, Evelyn pointed out. Eventually we'll need supplies. Medicine. Things I can't get without going to town. The moment I show my face. Then you don't show your face, I go. Jonah goes. Hazel can help. You stay here, out of sight. For how long? Weeks? Months? I can't ask you to... You didn't ask. I'm offering. Elias met her eyes. Look, I'm not gonna pretend this is simple. Victor's got resources and he's clearly willing to use them. But you run now. Weak and unprepared, you'll die. Both of you. So we buy time, let you recover properly, build up supplies, wait for the worst of winter to pass. Then, come spring, you make your move north with actual provisions and a fighting chance. Evelyn stared at him. Why would you do this? You don't owe me anything. No, I don't. Elias wasn't entirely sure himself. Maybe it was seeing Clara with that wooden horse. Maybe it was the way Evelyn looked at her daughter. Like she'd burn the world down before letting anyone hurt her. Or maybe he was just tired of being half alive, going through motions, pretending the hole inside him didn't exist. But I'm doing it anyway. So you can accept the help or spend the next 10 minutes arguing about it. Your choice. Jonah coughed something that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Eloquent as ever, Crow. Shut up. Clara looked up from her drawing. Mama, I like it here. Can we stay? Evelyn's face did something complicated. Sweetheart, it's not that simple. But Elias has a warm fire and Jonah brought food and nobody's yelling. Clara's voice got small. In Denver, there was always yelling. Uncle Victor yelled at you all the time. Here, it's quiet, safe. Nothing's safe, Evelyn said, but her voice lacked conviction. Then I'll take mostly safe over definitely dangerous, Jonah cut in. Ma'am, I've known Elias Crow for 12 years. He's stubborn, antisocial, and about as warm as a January creek. But when he commits to something, he sees it through. If he says he'll help you wait out winter, he means it. Evelyn looked between them. Jonah's weathered certainty, Elias's grim determination, her daughter's hopeful face. Something in her posture shifted, a tension releasing that Elias hadn't even noticed she'd been carrying. All right, she said finally. We'll stay, at least until spring, but I pull my weight. I'm not a burden. Didn't think you were, Elias said. And if Victor's men come here, then we handle it. How? Elias exchanged a look with Jonah. The trapper's expression had gone flat, dangerous in a way that reminded Elias of certain moments during the war. Moments when civilized men remembered they were also animals, and animals protected their territory. However, we have to, Jonah said quietly. The coffee had gone cold by the time they finished planning. Jonah knew the mountains better than anyone. Every trail, every pass, every place a man could hide or set an ambush. He sketched a rough map on paper Evelyn found, marking approaches to the cabin, defensive positions, places where early warning signals could be set. Bells, he suggested. String them on wire between the trees, about knee height. Someone comes through at night, they'll make noise. Won't stop anyone determined, but it'll give you warning. What about during the day? Evelyn asked. During the day, you see them coming? This clearing's got good sightlines in 3 directions. Only blind spot is the West Ridge, and that's a hard climb. Possible, but most men won't attempt it unless they're specifically trying to flank you. Elias studied the map. How many men you think Victor brought? Hazel said 2 for sure. Could be more waiting outside town. Jonah tapped the paper. But hired guns are predictable. They like odds in their favor. 3 men against 1 hermit hiding fugitives. They'll come confident. 3 men against 2 veterans who know the terrain. With defensive preparations and warning systems, that's different math. You really think they'll come here? Evelyn's voice was steady, but Elias saw her hands trembling slightly. Eventually, yeah. Victor's got that poster out, he's asking questions. Someone will remember seeing tracks or smoke from this direction, or hearing about the hermit who lives up past Widow's Drop. Might take days, might take weeks, but they'll piece it together. Then what? Then we convince them they're wrong, Elias said. Or we convince them looking further ain't worth the trouble. Clara had stopped drawing and was listening now, her small face serious. Will there be fighting? Maybe, Elias told her, because lying to children never helped. But if there is, you and your mama will be somewhere safe. That's a promise. Where? Jonah pulled out a second piece of paper and sketched quickly. There's a root cellar under the cabin's north corner. Elias built it for food storage, but it's solid, reinforced walls, separate entrance hidden under a woodpile. Storm comes, you 2 go down there. Quiet, hidden. Nobody finds you unless they know exactly where to look. I'm not hiding while you fight my battles, Evelyn said sharply. Yes, you are, Elias said, because Clara needs you alive more than she needs you brave. And because fighting ain't about courage, it's about training and experience, neither of which you have. I can shoot. Can you shoot a man? While he's shooting back? While your daughter's screaming? While everything's chaos and smoke and you can't tell friend from enemy? Elias's voice was harder than he meant it to be. I've seen men freeze in combat, good men, strong men. It's not about weakness, it's about preparation. You haven't been prepared for this kind of violence. Evelyn's jaw tightened. And you have? Yeah, I have. Something in his tone made her stop arguing. She looked at him differently then, seeing past the hermit and the rough edges to whatever lay beneath. Elias didn't like being seen that way. Made him feel exposed. Army? She asked. Medic. But I carried a rifle when I needed to. He turned back to the map. Point is, your job is keeping Clara calm and safe. Let us handle anything else. The conversation moved to logistics after that, supply lines, ammunition counts, how to ration food if they got snowed in. Jonah had brought enough for maybe 6 weeks if they stretched it. Elias had his own stores. Between them, they could probably make it to February before needing to risk a town run, unless Victor's men found them first. Night fell while they talked. Clara eventually curled up in Evelyn's lap and dozed off, exhausted by the day's tension. Evelyn shifted her carefully, smoothing the girl's hair with automatic tenderness. She's worn out, Jonah observed. Both of you are. 6 weeks of running will do that. Evelyn looked down at her daughter. I keep thinking she'll break, that I've asked too much of her, but she just keeps going, doesn't complain, doesn't cry, just carries that little wooden horse Elias made and tells me everything will be fine. Kids are tougher than we give them credit for, Jonah said. Seeing children survive things that would break grown men, they adapt. That's what I'm afraid of, that she's adapting to fear as normal, that she'll grow up thinking the world is nothing but running and hiding and looking over her shoulder. Then we make sure she doesn't have to, Elias said. We end this, one way or another. Evelyn met his eyes. You keep saying we, like this is your fight too. Guess it is now. Why? It was the third time she'd asked him that question, and Elias still didn't have a good answer. Or maybe he did, but admitting it meant cracking open doors he'd spent 6 years keeping sealed. Had a son once, he said finally. The words came out rough, like pulling splinters from old wood. About Clara's age, maybe a year older. Jamie, his mother called him. The cabin went very quiet. Fever took him, Elias continued. Same one that took my wife. I was an army medic. Knew medicine, knew anatomy and treatment and every damn thing you're supposed to know to save lives. Didn't matter. Watched them die anyway, couldn't do anything but hold them and wait. Evelyn's expression had gone soft. Elias. So when I heard Clara screaming out there in that storm, I could have kept walking. Should have, probably. None of my business, not my problem. But I keep thinking, what if someone had been there for Jamie? What if some stranger had heard him and decided to help instead of turning away? He shook his head. Can't change what happened to my boy, but maybe I can change what happens to yours. The silence stretched out. Even Jonah, who rarely showed sentiment, looked uncomfortable. Finally, Evelyn spoke. Thank you for telling me. Elias shrugged, already regretting the confession. Just explaining why I'm not throwing you out. Don't make it into something it's not. I wouldn't dream of it, Evelyn said. But her voice was gentle. Jonah cleared his throat. Right, well, on that cheerful note, I should probably set up those warning bells before it gets too dark to see. I'll help, Elias said, grateful for the excuse to move. They worked for the next 2 hours, stringing thin wire between trees at knee height, attaching small bells at intervals. The work was cold and tedious, but necessary. By the time they finished, a rough perimeter surrounded the cabin, not impenetrable, but enough to give warning if anyone approached at night. That'll do, Jonah said, testing one of the wires. The bells chimed softly. Won't stop anyone determined, but we'll hear them coming. They trudged back to the cabin. Inside, Evelyn had put Clara to bed and was cleaning up from dinner. She'd made stew from Jonah's dried meat and some vegetables Elias had stored, better than anything he'd eaten in months. Bells are set, Elias reported. Anyone comes through the trees tonight, we'll know. What about during the day? During the day, we stay alert, keep weapons close, take shifts if we have to. He hung his coat by the door. Jonah, you staying? Figure I might as well. Got nothing better to do, and someone needs to make sure you don't do anything stupid. I don't do stupid things. You took in fugitives from a rich man with hired guns. That's pretty stupid. That's different. How? Elias didn't have an answer for that, so he just grunted and checked his rifle for the third time that evening. Evelyn watched them with something like amusement. You two argue like an old married couple. We've known each other too long, Jonah said. Tends to breed contempt or familiarity. Same thing out here. They settled in for the night. Jonah took the floor near the fire, wrapped in one of his own blankets. Evelyn and Clara shared the bed. Elias pulled his chair near the window where he could watch the clearing and dozed in shifts, rifle across his lap. Nothing happened. The bells stayed silent. The night passed without incident. When dawn broke grey and cold, Elias felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. Maybe they'd have more time than he thought. Or maybe Victor's men were just being patient. Over the next week, they fell into something resembling a routine. Elias and Jonah reinforced the cabin's defenses, barricaded windows, cleared firing lanes, stockpiled ammunition and medical supplies. Evelyn cooked, cleaned, and slowly regained her strength. Clara helped where she could and stayed out of the way when she couldn't. An invisible child when needed and a bright presence when allowed. Hazel rode up twice more, bringing news from town. Victor was still in Dry Creek, still asking questions, still showing that damn poster around. A few people had reported seeing smoke from the direction of Elias's cabin, but nobody had confirmed anything. Most folks, it seemed, were keeping their mouths shut. Won't last forever, Hazel warned during her second visit. Folks are curious, and $500 is a lot of money to people who work hard for pennies. Anyone specific we should worry about? Jonah asked. Maybe. Charlie Preston at the general store has been asking about your usual supply runs. When you come to town, what you buy, whether you've seemed different lately. Could be innocent. Could be he's fishing for information to sell. Charlie's an ass, but I didn't think he was the betraying type, Elias said. Money changes people. Makes them think about what they could do with it. Pay off debts. Fix their roof, buy their wife that dress she's been wanting, start seeming justified, especially if they convince themselves they're just confirming public information. Evelyn had been listening from the doorway. What if I turned myself in? Everyone stared at her. Hear me out, she continued. Victor wants me declared unfit. He wants custody of Clara. But what if I went back to Denver, hired real lawyers, fought him in court, properly with time to prepare, with Clara safe somewhere he can't reach her? He'd have you arrested the moment you cross city limits, Jonah interrupted. Those custody papers? They're legal even if they're built on lies. You go back, you're walking into a jail cell, and Clara becomes a ward of the court. Guess who the court gives her to? But if I could prove Victor bribed officials, with what evidence? You think those doctors and judges kept receipts? Hazel shook her head. Men like Victor Hale don't leave trails. They cover their tracks, pay people to forget, make problems disappear. You go back, you lose. Period. Evelyn's shoulders sagged. Then what am I supposed to do? Spend the rest of my life running, raise Clara in hiding, moving from place to place, always looking over our shoulders? You survive, Elias said. First rule of any fight, stay alive long enough to find a better option. And if there isn't a better option, then you make one. Before Evelyn could respond, the bells started ringing. Everyone froze. The sound came from the eastern perimeter. 3 bells chiming in sequence, meaning someone or something was moving through the trees from that direction. Elias grabbed his rifle. Jonah already had his shotgun in hand. Hazel moved to her horse, untying the reins. Cellar, Elias told Evelyn. Now, take Clara and don't come out until I say, but now! Evelyn scooped up Clara and ran for the hidden entrance Jonah had shown her. Elias heard the door slam shut, the sound of the bolt sliding home. Could be an animal, Jonah said quietly, taking position at the window. Could be, but probably isn't. Probably not. They waited. The bells continued their irregular chiming. Whatever was out there wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. Either didn't know about the bells or didn't care. Then a voice called out from the trees. Elias Crow? You in there? Male. Unfamiliar. Confident in a way that suggested either stupidity or numbers. Elias moved to the door but didn't open it. Who's asking? Name's Luther Cass, working for a man named Victor Hale. We're looking for his sister-in-law and niece. Heard you might have seen them. Heard wrong? That's so, 'cause we got word from Dry Creek that smoke's been coming from this direction, more regular than usual. More cooking maybe, more people. I've been burning green wood, makes more smoke. A pause then. Mind if we come take a look around? Just to satisfy our employer's concerns? Yeah, I mind. This is private property. You're trespassing. Now, Mr. Crow, no need to be unfriendly, we're just doing our job. 5 minutes of your time, we confirm. You haven't seen anyone matching the description. We're on our way. Easy. Jonah had moved to the other window, watching for flanking movement. He held up 2 fingers, pointed west. 2 more men circling around. How many you bring? Elias called. Luther laughed. Just enough. Come on out. Let's talk like civilized folk. I'm plenty civilized right here. And you've got about 30 seconds to clear off my land before I start shooting. That a threat? It's a fact. Montana law says a man can defend his property from trespassers. You're trespassing. Do the math. Another pause. Elias could almost hear Luther weighing options. Press the confrontation or retreat and try a different approach. Men like Luther were bullies at heart. They liked easy targets, not resistance. This ain't over, Luther finally called. Victor Hale's offering good money for information. Real good money. You might want to think about that. Already thought about it. Answers still no. Now get off my land. The bells chimed again, this time moving away. Elias watched through a gap in the shutters as 3 figures retreated into the trees, Luther in the middle, 2 others flanking. They moved without urgency, making it clear they weren't afraid. That was almost worse than if they'd run. They'll be back, Jonah said, once the bells went silent. I know. Hazel had stayed mounted throughout the confrontation. I should go. If they see me here, they'll know something's up. Be careful, Elias said. Always am. She turned her horse toward the southern trail, then paused. Elias? Those men weren't here to look around. They were testing defenses, seeing how you'd react, counting how many people might be inside. Next time they come, it won't be for conversation. Then she was gone, leaving Elias and Jonah standing in the clearing, rifles in hand, watching the trees. Elias went to the cellar and knocked twice, the all-clear signal. The door opened and Evelyn emerged. Clara pressed against her side. What happened? Evelyn asked. Victor's men, 3 of them, asking questions. Did they see us? No, but they know something's different. They'll report back to Victor and he'll decide next steps. Evelyn's face had gone pale. Maybe we should leave tonight before they come back with more men. And go where? They're already watching the approaches. You run now, they'll catch you on the trail. Elias shook his head. We knew this was coming. We're as ready as we're going to be. But Clara, we'll be fine. We've got defensive positions, warning systems, 2 men who know how to fight, and 1 woman who's mean enough to back us up when needed. He looked at Hazel's retreating form. We're not helpless. Jonah was already back at the windows, checking sightlines. They'll wait until dark, hit us when they think we're sleeping, probably tomorrow or the day after. Give themselves time to plan, maybe bring reinforcements. So what do we do? Evelyn asked. We don't sleep, Elias said. We watch, we wait, and when they come, we make sure they regret it. Clara tugged at her mother's sleeve. Mama, I'm scared. Evelyn knelt down, taking her daughter's face in both hands. I know, sweetheart. I'm scared too. But Elias and Jonah are going to keep us safe. Remember what I told you about being brave? That brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. That's right. Evelyn kissed her forehead. We're going to be brave together, okay? Clara nodded and clutched her wooden horse tighter. Watching them, Elias felt something shift in his chest. That same uncomfortable warmth he'd been trying to ignore for days. This wasn't just about keeping strangers alive anymore. Somewhere between pulling them from the storm and carving toys and listening to Clara's laugh echo through his cabin, it had become personal. These weren't fugitives he was sheltering, they were people he was protecting. And that scared him more than any hired gun Victor Hale could send. Luther Cass didn't come back the next night or the one after that. 5 days passed with nothing but wind and snow and the normal sounds of the Montana wilderness. Elias found himself checking the tree line constantly, rifle always within reach, sleep coming in fragments that left him more exhausted than rested. Jonah stayed through it all, sleeping in shifts with Elias, keeping watch while Evelyn tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy for Clara. The girl was resilient, but even she'd started waking from nightmares, crying out for her mother in the dark. On the 6th day, Hazel rode up with news that made Elias's blood run cold. Victor's doubled the reward, she said without preamble. $1,000 now. Posted new flyers all over town, brought in 4 more men. He's not playing anymore. How many's that total? Jonah asked. 7 that I've seen. Could be more. They're asking about every cabin, every homestead within 20 miles. Systematic. Professional. Hazel's expression was grim. And Charlie Preston finally talked. Told them about your supply runs, mentioned you'd seemed different lately. They're coming, Elias. Question isn't if, it's when. Evelyn had been standing in the doorway. She went very still. This is my fault. All of it. I never should have. Don't. Elias cut her off. We're past that. What's done is done. But Clara is safer here than she'd be running through the mountains in December. He turned to Hazel. What's the mood in town? Mixed. Some folks think Victor's just a concerned relative trying to save his niece from an unstable woman. Others smell something rotten and don't like outsiders throwing weight around. But $1,000 is $1,000. Even the honest ones are starting to wonder if maybe they should help just to end it. Would ending it involve Evelyn in chains and Clara in Victor's custody? Jonah's voice was flat. Probably, but people are good at convincing themselves that's not their problem once the money's in hand. Elias paced to the window, his mind working through scenarios. 7 men, minimum, possibly more. Armed, paid, motivated by money rather than loyalty, which made them dangerous but not suicidal. They'd want the reward, but they'd also want to live to spend it. They'll come at night, he said. Try to surround the cabin, force us out, or smoke us out. Standard siege tactics. Or they just burn the place down, Jonah offered. Easiest way to flush people. Not if they want Evelyn alive for Victor. Dead fugitive doesn't help his custody claim. Still leaves plenty of violent options. I know. Hazel shifted in her saddle. There might be another way. Everyone looked at her. Marriage, she said simply. Evelyn blinked. What? You marry someone. Legal marriage, witnessed and recorded, changes your custody status, makes Victor's claim harder to enforce. Can't argue you're an unstable single woman if you're a married woman with a husband willing to vouch for you. Evelyn struggled for words. That's insane. Marriage doesn't work like that. It's not a legal shield. Out here, it kind of is, Jonah said slowly. Frontier law is different from city law. Judge sees a married woman with a homestead and a husband. He's less likely to side with a distant relative claiming instability, especially if that relative's from out of territory and throwing money around. But I don't. Evelyn looked helplessly between them. I can't just marry someone. That's not how marriage works. It's exactly how marriage works on the frontier, Hazel countered. Half the couples in Dry Creek married for practical reasons. Land rights, protection, survival. Romance came later if it came at all. This wouldn't be different. Yes, it would. Because I'd be trapping some poor man into a legal arrangement just to save myself from me, Elias heard himself say. The word came out before he'd fully thought it through. You'd marry me. The cabin went silent except for the fire's crackle. Evelyn stared at him. What? You heard me, we get married, legal ceremony, proper witnesses. You become Evelyn Crow. Clara becomes my stepdaughter. Victor's custody claim gets a lot more complicated. Elise, you can't be serious. Why not? I've got land, a homestead, no criminal record. I'm a veteran and a former medic. On paper, I'm exactly the kind of stable husband a judge would approve of. But you don't want to get married. You don't even like having people around. Doesn't matter what I want. Matters what works. Elias crossed his arms. You got a better idea? Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. This is crazy. Most things worth doing are. You'd be legally bound to me, to Clara. You'd be taking on responsibility for... I already took on that responsibility when I pulled you out of that storm. Elias met her eyes. This just makes it official. Jonah was watching the exchange with interest. He's got a point. Marriage would complicate things for Victor. He'd have to prove you're both unfit, and that's a harder case to make. It wouldn't stop him, Evelyn said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. No, but it'd slow him down, give us more options. Hazel leaned forward in her saddle. Look, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's better than waiting here for 7 armed men to decide whether to take you peacefully or violently. Evelyn sank into a chair. Her hands were shaking. I can't ask you to do this, Elias. It's too much. You're not asking. I'm offering. Why? That question, again, the same one she'd asked him 3 times already, and this time Elias didn't have the energy to deflect. Because watching someone fight this hard for their kid reminds me why I used to give a damn about things, he said quietly. And because if I'm gonna start caring again, might as well commit to it properly. Clara had been sitting by the fire pretending not to listen. Now she looked up, her small face hopeful. Does this mean Elias would be my papa? The question hit Elias like a physical blow. He saw Evelyn flinch, saw Jonah suddenly become very interested in his rifle cleaning, saw Hazel's expression soften. Stepfather? Evelyn corrected gently. It would mean Elias would be your stepfather. Your papa was Thomas. Nobody replaced him. I know. But I could have a stepfather too, right? Like Mary Hutchins in Denver had after her papa died? Yes, you could. Clara considered this with the seriousness of someone much older. Would he be a good stepfather? Kid, I don't know how to be any kind of father, Elias said honestly, but I can promise I won't let anyone hurt you. That count for something? Clara nodded solemnly. Then she crossed the room and held out her wooden horse. You should hold on to this, for luck. Elias took the carved figure, his throat suddenly tight. Thanks. Evelyn was watching them with an expression Elias couldn't quite read. If we do this, she said slowly, there have to be rules. Such as? This is a marriage of convenience, nothing more. Separate rooms, separate lives. We're partners in protecting Clara, not... She struggled for words. Not anything else. Fine with me. I mean it, Elias. I won't be owned again. My first marriage was... She stopped, visibly collecting herself. Thomas was a good man in many ways, but he expected certain things. Obedience, deference. I became someone I didn't recognize just to keep peace in the house. I won't do that again. I'm not asking you to. Elias set the wooden horse on the table between them. You want separate rooms? You got them. I'll build you your own space, your own door, your own lock. You want separate lives? Fine. We'll be married on paper and nothing else. But Clara gets protection, you get legal standing, and Victor gets a much harder fight. That's the deal. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. And what do you get out of this? Honestly, I'm not sure, but maybe that's the point. Hazel cleared her throat. If you're doing this, needs to be soon. Today, if possible. Victor's men could move anytime, and the marriage won't mean much if you're in custody when it happens. There's a minister in Dry Creek, Jonah said. Reverend Walsh. He'd do it quietly if we asked. And if Victor's watching the town? Then we don't go to town. Walsh makes house calls for emergencies. This qualifies. You think he'd ride out here in December? For the right reasons, yeah. Walsh is ornery, but he's got principles. Doesn't like bullies. Doesn't like rich men buying justice. Jonah stood. I can ride to town, bring him back. We could be married by sunset. It was all moving too fast. Elias saw the panic starting to build in Evelyn's face, the way her breathing had gone shallow. This was a woman who'd already had one marriage go wrong, who'd spent years being controlled and diminished. Asking her to trust another legal bond, even a practical one, was asking a lot. Take a minute, he told her. Think it through. This is your choice, not mine. Evelyn stood and walked to the window. She stood there for a long time, looking out at the snow-covered clearing, her arms wrapped around herself. Clara watched her mother with worried eyes. Finally, Evelyn spoke without turning around. Will you promise me something? Depends on what it is. Promise that no matter what happens, legally, personally, whatever, Clara stays with me, that you won't use this marriage to try to take her? I promise. And if something happens to me, you'll make sure she's safe. Not with Victor. Never with Victor. Elias hesitated. That was a bigger promise, one with implications that stretched beyond a marriage of convenience. But looking at Clara's small, scared face, he found himself nodding. I promise. Evelyn turned around. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Then yes, I'll marry you. For Clara. For survival. For whatever time we need to keep her safe. All right then. Elias looked at Jonah. Go get the Reverend. Jonah grabbed his coat and was gone within minutes, riding hard for Dry Creek. That left Elias, Evelyn, Clara, and Hazel in a cabin that suddenly felt too small for the weight of what they'd just decided. Well, Hazel said into the silence, suppose I should witness this properly. Someone's got to make sure you don't back out. I don't back out of commitments, Elias said. No, you just avoid making them in the first place. This is progress. She dismounted and tied her horse. Got any coffee? This might take a while. The next few hours passed in strange, suspended tension. Evelyn tried to make herself presentable with what little she had, a worn dress that had seen better days, her hair brushed and pinned back as best she could manage. Clara helped solemnly, treating it like the serious occasion it was. Elias just stood by the window and watched the tree line, rifle in hand, trying not to think too hard about what he was about to do. You sure about this? Hazel asked quietly from beside him. No. That's honest, at least. It's practical, Elias said. Practical doesn't require being sure, just requires doing what needs doing. You keep telling yourself that. Hazel sipped her coffee. But I've known you long enough to know when you're lying to yourself. This stopped being just practical about 3 days ago. You don't know what you're talking about. Sure I don't. She smiled into her cup. Keep thinking that too. Elias didn't respond, mostly because he was afraid she was right. Jonah returned near sunset with a small, wiry man bundled in so many layers he looked like a moving pile of fabric. Reverend Walsh emerged from the coverings with ice in his beard and fire in his eyes. This better be worth freezing my extremities off, Briggs, he announced. I've performed ceremonies in some strange circumstances, but riding through December cold for a wedding takes the prize. Appreciate you coming, Reverend, Elias said. Walsh looked around the cabin, taking in Evelyn's nervous posture, Clara's wide eyes, the weapons propped against every available surface. Someone going to explain what's actually happening here? Because Briggs gave me some story about urgent marriage needs and protective custody that made approximately 0 sense. It's complicated, Evelyn said. Marriage usually is, but I've got time. Walsh settled into a chair and fixed them with an expectant stare. So they explained Victor, the custody battle, the flight from Denver, the reward money, the hired guns. Walsh listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from skeptical to understanding to quietly furious. So this Victor Hale is using legal corruption to steal a child for her inheritance, he summarized when they finished. That's the short version, Evelyn confirmed. And you two are getting married to complicate his legal standing? Yes. Walsh looked between them. You love each other? No, they said simultaneously. Planning to? That's not the point of this, Elias said. Isn't it always the point? But Walsh was smiling slightly. Though, I suppose practicality has its place. I've married homesteaders for less compelling reasons. At least you're honest about it. So you'll do it? Evelyn asked. Evelyn. Under one condition. Walsh pointed at both of them. You treat this marriage with the respect it deserves, not as a convenient fiction, but as a real commitment. You're making vows before witnesses. Those vows mean something, practical or not. Can you do that? Elias met Evelyn's eyes. In them he saw fear and determination and something else he couldn't quite name. Yeah, he said, we can do that. Then let's get married. The ceremony was nothing like what either of them probably imagined marriage would be. No church, no flowers, no celebration. Just 5 people standing in a rough cabin while snow fell outside and danger waited in the trees. Walsh pulled out a worn Bible and opened it to a marked page. Normally I'd give a speech about love and commitment, he said, but I think we're all aware this isn't normal circumstances, so I'll keep it simple. He looked at Elias. Do you, Elias Crow, take Evelyn Hale as your lawfully wedded wife? To protect and provide for, in sickness and health, for as long as you both shall live? Elias felt the weight of every word. Once he said yes, there was no going back. This became real, legally binding, a commitment that would follow him regardless of what happened next. He thought about Clara's scared face in the storm, about Evelyn's fierce determination to keep her daughter safe, about the cabin that had started to feel less like a tomb and more like something worth defending. I do, he said. Walsh turned to Evelyn. Do you, Evelyn Hale, take Elias Crow as your lawfully wedded husband, to trust and honor, in sickness and health, for as long as you both shall live? Evelyn's hands were shaking, but her voice came out clear. I do. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife. Walsh closed the Bible. Elias, you may kiss your bride, though given the circumstances, a handshake might be more appropriate. They shook hands. It felt absurd and solemn at the same time. Congratulations, Walsh said dryly. You're now legally bound to face whatever hell Victor Hale brings down on you, together. Comforting, Evelyn muttered. Wasn't meant to be. Was meant to be truthful. Walsh pulled out papers from his coat. I'll need both your signatures plus witnesses. Hazel, Jonah, you're up. They signed in silence. Walsh countersigned and dated it, then folded the papers carefully. I'll file this in Dry Creek tomorrow. Once it's registered, you're officially married in the eyes of the law. How long before Victor finds out? Elias asked. Depends how closely he's watching. Could be days, could be weeks. But he will find out eventually. Public records are public. Good, Evelyn said, surprising everyone. I want him to know. I want him to understand that I'm not the helpless widow he thought he could push around anymore. There was steel in her voice that hadn't been there before. Elias found himself reassessing this woman he'd just married. She'd seemed fragile when he first pulled her from the storm, broken and desperate and barely holding on. But that fragility was just exhaustion. Underneath was something harder, something that had carried a child 500 miles through hostile territory and was now willing to marry a stranger just to keep fighting. Victor Hale had underestimated her badly. Elias was starting to think maybe he had too. Walsh stayed for dinner, regaling them with stories from 30 years of frontier ministry, weddings performed at gunpoint, funerals interrupted by bear attacks, baptisms in frozen rivers. By the time he left, Clara was giggling, and even Evelyn had relaxed slightly. "You'll be all right," Walsh told them at the door. "Not because this will be easy. It won't, but because you're both stubborn enough to see it through." He shook Elias's hand. "Take care of them. And for what it's worth, I think this might turn out better than you expect." "How do you figure?" "Because sometimes the best things in life are the ones we back into accidentally." Walsh tipped his hat to Evelyn. "Mrs. Crow, don't let this one brood too much. He's got a tendency." Then he was gone, riding back toward Dry Creek through the gathering darkness. The cabin felt different after he left. More settled somehow, like something had fundamentally shifted even though everything looked the same. "Mrs. Crow?" Evelyn said quietly, testing the name. "That's going to take getting used to. You don't have to use it if you don't want." "No, I do. It's part of the arrangement." She looked at him. "Are you all right? You've been quiet?" "Just thinking about how we're going to explain this when Victor's men show up asking questions. We tell them the truth. I'm a married woman living on her husband's homestead. Clara is my daughter and your stepdaughter. Victor's custody claim is now against both of us, not just me. They won't like that. I don't particularly care what they like." Evelyn moved to the fire, warming her hands. "I'm tired of running, Elias. Tired of being afraid. This marriage might not stop Victor, but it shows I'm willing to fight back. That has to count for something." Jonah, who'd been quietly setting up his bedroll, spoke up. "It counts for a lot. Shows you're not alone anymore. People like Victor rely on isolation. They target the vulnerable, the separated, the ones with no support. You just proved you have support. That changes the calculation." "Or it makes him angrier," Hazel pointed out. "Men like that don't handle challenges well." "Then let him be angry," Evelyn said. There was that steel again. At least angry men make mistakes. They settled in for the night. Elias had meant what he said about separate rooms, so he'd started clearing out the small storage space attached to the cabin's north wall. It wasn't much, barely big enough for a bed and a trunk, but it had its own door and would give Evelyn privacy. She found him working on it after Clara had gone to sleep. "You don't have to do this tonight," she said from the doorway. "Might as well. Can't sleep anyway." "Me neither." She watched him hammer boards into place. "This is more than I expected. It's barely a room. It's mine. That's more than I've had in years." Evelyn stepped inside, running her hand along the rough walls. Thomas's house was beautiful, but it was his. Everything in it was chosen by him, arranged by him, controlled by him. I was just another decoration. "He hit you?" "No, he wasn't violent, just suffocating. Every decision had to go through him, every purchase, every friend, every moment of my day. He loved me in his way, but his love felt like ownership." Elias drove another nail home. "That's not love. I know that now. Took me a long time to understand the difference." She sat on the partially constructed bed frame. "You said you'd give me freedom? Did you mean it?" "Yeah." "Why?" Most men wouldn't. Most men would see marriage as license to, I'm not most men, and I've got no interest in owning anyone. Elias set down his hammer. My wife Sarah, she was her own person, fierce and smart, and didn't take orders from anyone, including me. That's what made her worth loving. Wouldn't have changed her for anything. You miss her every day, but missing her doesn't mean I want a replacement. Nobody could replace Sarah. He met Evelyn's eyes. So you don't have to worry. This marriage is exactly what we agreed. Protection and partnership. Nothing more unless you decide different. And if I never decide different, then we live as partners and that's enough. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Thank you for understanding, for not expecting. She trailed off. It's fine, I'm not exactly marriage material anyway. I don't know. You carved Clara a horse, you're building me a room. You married a fugitive to keep her safe from her powerful brother-in-law. That's pretty decent husband behavior. That's just basic human decency, which is rarer than you think. Evelyn stood. I should let you work, but Elias, I meant what I said earlier. This might be practical, but I'll take it seriously. You have my word on that. I know. After she left, Elias continued building until his hands ached and his eyes blurred from fatigue. When he finally stopped, the small room was finished. Rough but functional, with a door that latched and walls that would keep out the cold. He'd just given his wife of 3 hours her own space, her own freedom. It felt right, more right than anything had felt in years. The attack came 2 nights later. Elias woke to the bells, not the gentle chiming of animals moving through the perimeter, but frantic jangling from multiple directions at once. He was on his feet with his rifle before his eyes fully focused, muscle memory from the war taking over. Jonah! I hear it. The trapper was already at the window, shotgun ready. East and west perimeters, multiple contacts. Elias grabbed the second rifle and moved to the opposite window. Through the darkness, he could see shadows moving between the trees. At least 4, maybe more. They weren't being subtle anymore. Evelyn, he called. Sella, now. She appeared in her doorway, Clara already in her arms. Her face was pale but composed. How many? Don't know. Enough. Go. Be careful. Always am. Now go. Evelyn ran for the hidden cellar entrance with Clara clutching her neck. Elias heard the door slam, the bolt slide home. Good. They were safe, at least for now. Crow! Luther's voice carried across the clearing. We're done playing. Send out Evelyn Hale and the girl. Nobody gets hurt. You've got 60 seconds. And if I don't, then we come in and take them. Your choice how much blood gets spilled. Elias and Jonah exchanged looks. This was it, the moment they'd been preparing for. 7 men against 2, attacking at night when they thought the advantage was theirs. They were about to learn different. Clock's ticking, Crow. Elias moved away from the window and called back. Got bad news for you, Luther. Evelyn Hale doesn't live here anymore. What? She got married 2 days ago. You are looking for Evelyn Crow now, and she's under my protection as my legal wife. Silence from the trees. Then, you're lying. Filed the papers in Dry Creek, public record. You can check when you limp back to town. Doesn't matter. Victor wants the woman and the kid. Marriage doesn't change that. Actually, it does. Changes the custody situation significantly. But you're welcome to explain that to a judge after I filed charges for armed trespass and attempted kidnapping. Elias chambered a round loud enough to be heard across the clearing. Or you can walk away now, tell Victor his plan failed, and everyone lives to see morning. Not happening. Then I guess we're doing this the hard way. The first shot shattered the window next to Elias's head. He dropped and returned fire, aiming for the muzzle flash he'd seen from the tree line. Someone screamed, hit, but not down. Then it was chaos. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions at once. Jonah's shotgun roared, the sound deafening in the confined space. Elias fired methodically, picking targets as they revealed themselves. Glass shattered, wood splintered, smoke filled the cabin. "Reloading!" Jonah called. Elias provided covering fire while the trapper swapped shells. His hands were steady. Too steady, really, considering 7 men were trying to kill them. But this felt familiar in a horrible way. The war had taught him how to shut down everything except the immediate tactical situation. Fear, doubt, morality, all of it went into a box so the animal could do what animals did best: survive. A figure rushed the door. Elias shot him in the leg and he went down hard, screaming. Another came from the side window. Jonah's shotgun caught him center mass and he didn't scream at all. Then something hit the roof with a heavy thud. "They're on top!" Jonah said, already swinging his weapon up. Elias fired through the ceiling. No scream, but the footsteps moved away fast. Someone was trying to get to the chimney, smoke them out, or drop something down it. "I've got the roof," he told Jonah. "Watch the windows." He grabbed his pistol and kicked open the door, rolling out into the snow. Gunfire followed him but went high. Elias came up firing, 3 shots at the shadow on the roof. The shadow fell backward with a yell and crashed into the snow 20 feet from the cabin. Movement to his left. Elias spun and fired. Miss. The figure fired back, amateur, shooting wild. Elias took his time, breathed out, squeezed. The figure dropped. That was 4 down, 3 left maybe. "Enough!" Luther's voice, but different now. Panicked, angry. "Call it off, Luther," Elias said into the darkness. "You're losing. You killed my men. You brought them into a fight they weren't prepared for. That's on you." Elias reloaded, still scanning for targets. "Walk away. Take your wounded and go. This doesn't have to end with everyone dead. Victor's not going to. Victor's not here. You are. And you're bleeding money and men for a custody case you can't win anymore. Cut your losses." Silence. Elias could almost hear Luther calculating how much Victor was paying versus how much dying here was worth. Finally, "This isn't over." "Yes, it is. For tonight, anyway." More silence. Then the sound of men retreating through the snow, dragging wounded with them. The bells chimed as they crossed the perimeter, going the opposite direction. Elias waited 5 full minutes before moving. When he was sure they were gone, he circled the cabin, checking the fallen. 2 dead, 1 unconscious, but alive. He dragged the unconscious one inside, might have information, and leaving him to freeze seemed wrong even after everything. Jonah had already barricaded the broken windows. "We hurt? No. You?" "Just my pride. Should have seen that roof approach coming." Elias went to the cellar and knocked. "All clear." The door opened. Evelyn emerged first, Clara behind her. Both were pale but unharmed. "Is it over?" Evelyn asked. For now, she saw the unconscious man on the floor, the blood, the shattered windows. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't scream or cry or any of the things Elias half expected. She just pulled Clara close and asked, "What do we do with him? Patch him up? Question him if he wakes? Use him as leverage if we need to? And if he doesn't wake? Then we bury him come morning." Evelyn nodded and went to get medical supplies. No hesitation, no moral hand-wringing about treating someone who just tried to kill them. Just practical action. Elias found himself revising his assessment of her yet again. This woman wasn't just strong, she was adaptable in ways that would have made her dangerous if she'd chosen that path. Victor had no idea what he'd created by pushing her this far. By dawn, they'd cleaned up the worst of the damage. The wounded man, Pike, according to papers in his coat, had regained consciousness long enough to confirm Luther had been hired with 6 others to retrieve Evelyn and Clara by any means necessary. Victor was in Dry Creek, waiting for news. He wasn't going to like what he heard. "What now?" Jonah asked as pale light filtered through the broken windows. Elias looked at Evelyn. She was holding Clara, both of them exhausted, both of them still there, still alive. "Now," Elias said, "we stop hiding and start fighting back." Pike talked for 3 hours before Jonah finally let him go, bleeding and limping back toward Dry Creek with a message for Victor that was more threat than courtesy. The information he'd given them was worth the mercy. Victor had 8 men total now, not 7, all of them hired muscle from Denver with experience in things respectable people didn't discuss. He was staying at Miller's boarding house, paying premium rates for privacy and discretion, and he was furious about the failed attack. "He's gonna come himself next time," Pike had said through split lips. "Won't trust hired help after this. Victor Hale don't lose twice." Now, watching the sun climb over the mountains, Elias considered their options. They'd won 1 fight, but Pike was right. Victor wouldn't make the same mistakes again. Next time would be different. Worse. "We can't just wait here for round 2, Evelyn said. She'd been quiet since the shooting stopped, but her mind had clearly been working. "He'll bring more men, better weapons, or he'll try something we haven't prepared for." "Could burn us out," Jonah offered, not helpfully. "Or wait until we need supplies and hit us on the trail. Plenty of options for a man with money and patience. Then we don't give him time to use them." Evelyn crossed to the table where Pike's pistol lay alongside the papers they'd taken from him. "We go to Dry Creek. Today. Confront him publicly where he can't just shoot his way to what he wants." Elias shook his head. "That's suicide. He's got men watching every approach. You show your face in town, you're walking into a trap. Not if we bring witnesses, not if we make it public enough that violence becomes too costly." Her eyes had that hard gleam again. "Victor's power comes from operating in shadows, bribing officials behind closed doors, spreading rumors where people can't challenge them. Drag him into daylight and he loses that advantage. Or he just has his men grab you in the middle of Main Street and claims legal custody. He could try, but I'm not Evelyn Hale anymore, remember? I'm Evelyn Crow, legally married with a homestead and a husband. That changes things." Jonah had been listening from his position at the window. "She's got a point. Victor's whole strategy relied on painting her as unstable and alone. Married woman with community support is harder to discredit." "Community support?" Elias gestured at the broken windows. "Last I checked, we've got Hazel, Reverend Walsh, and maybe a handful of people who aren't actively trying to collect reward money. That's not exactly an army. It's enough if we use it right." Evelyn picked up one of the letters from the pile on the table, documents Pike had been carrying that outlined Victor's instructions to his men. These prove he hired men to use violence, that he's been lying about legal custody when he's really just trying to steal a fortune. If we show these to the right people, Victor will claim they're forgeries. Probably, but it plants doubt. Makes people ask questions. She met Elias's eyes. "I'm tired of running, tired of hiding. Victor thinks I'm weak because I ran. I need to show him, show everyone, that I only ran to protect Clara. Now that she's safer, I can fight back. She's not safer. We just survived 1 attack, there'll be more. Then let's end it before more come." Evelyn's voice was steel-wrapped in conviction. "We ride to Dry Creek. We confront Victor publicly. We show those documents to Sheriff Morton and anyone else who'll listen. We force him to either back down or reveal himself for what he really is." Elias wanted to argue, but part of him recognized the logic. Waiting here just gave Victor time to regroup, to plan something worse. Going on offense might catch him off balance, especially after losing 2 men and having a third sent back bleeding. "It's risky," he said finally. "Everything's risky. At least this way we control the timing." Jonah made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a cough. "She argues like you do, Crow. No wonder you married her." "We married for practical reasons." "Sure you did." The trapper stood and stretched, but she's right. Sitting here waiting is just slow dying. Rather die on my feet, making noise than quiet in a cabin. "Nobody's dying," Elias snapped. Then, quieter. "All right, we go to Dry Creek. But we do it smart, armed, alert, and with exit strategies if things go wrong." "What about Clara?" Evelyn asked. That was the question, wasn't it? Taking a 5-year-old into potential danger was unthinkable, but leaving her here alone was worse. Hazel, Elias decided. "We get Clara to Hazel's place first. It's fortified, Hazel's meaner than a cornered badger, and nobody'd think to look for the girl at the post office." "Will she agree to that?" "If we ask right, yeah. Hazel's got no love for bullies, and she's already invested in keeping you two safe." They spent the next hour preparing. Elias and Jonah loaded weapons and checked ammunition, while Evelyn packed a small bag for Clara, clothes, the wooden horse, a few other treasures the girl had collected. Clara watched with worried eyes but didn't cry, which somehow made it worse. "Are you coming back?" she asked her mother. Evelyn knelt down, taking Clara's face in her hands. "Yes, I promise." "You promised before. In Denver. Then we had to run. I know. But this time is different. This time I'm not running away from something. I'm running toward it. There's a difference." Clara considered this with the gravity of someone much older. "Will Elias come back too?" Evelyn glanced at him. Elias found himself nodding before he'd consciously decided to. "Yeah, kid, I'll come back." "Promise?" "Promise." Clara seemed satisfied with that. She hugged her mother fiercely, then surprised Elias by hugging him too. A quick, desperate squeeze before pulling back and pretending she hadn't done it. They rode out mid-morning, following the southern trail toward Dry Creek. The day was clear and cold, sun glinting off snow that crunched under the horses' hooves. Elias kept scanning the tree line, rifle across his saddle, expecting ambush at every bend. None came. Either Victor's remaining men were licking their wounds, or they were already in position in town. Elias wasn't sure which possibility worried him more. Hazel's post office sat on the north edge of Dry Creek, a squat building that looked like it had been built to withstand siege, which, knowing Hazel, it probably had been. She emerged before they'd even dismounted, shotgun in hand, eyes already assessing the situation. "Heard you had excitement last night," she said without preamble. "Luther Cass came through this morning with 2 dead and 1 wounded. Victor's having fits." "Good," Evelyn said. "Let him." Hazel's eyebrows rose. "Well, someone found her spine." "I never lost it, just had to remember where I put it." Evelyn dismounted and helped Clara down. "We need a favor." "Figured as much. Nobody rides into town after a gunfight unless they're planning something stupid or desperate." "Which is it?" "Both," Elias admitted. "We're confronting Victor. Need Clara somewhere safe while we do it." Hazel looked at the girl, who was clutching her wooden horse and trying to be brave. Something in the older woman's expression softened. "She can stay here, but you better come back for her. I'm too old to raise another child." "We'll come back," Evelyn promised. "See that you do." Hazel ushered Clara inside, then turned back to them. "Victor's at Miller's. Been there all morning, probably hearing about what happened. His remaining men are scattered around town. Saw 2 at the saloon, another watching the general store. They'll spot you the moment you hit Main Street." "Let them," Evelyn said. I want him to know I'm here. Brave talk. You got a plan beyond walking in and hoping for the best? Elias pulled out the documents Pike had been carrying. We're taking these to Sheriff Morton. They show Victor hired men for violence, prove his custody claims are just cover for theft. It's not much, but it's something. Morton's decent enough, but he's also practical. Rich man with lawyers versus fugitive woman with questionable documents. That's not a fight he'll want. Then we make him want it, make it public enough that staying neutral becomes harder than taking a side. Hazel studied them both. You've changed, she said to Evelyn. 2 weeks ago, you were half dead and terrified. Now you're riding into town to confront the man who's been hunting you. What happened? I got married, Evelyn said simply. Turns out, having someone stand with you instead of controlling you makes a difference. Hazel's gaze shifted to Elias, who suddenly found the horizon very interesting. That it does, she said quietly. All right, I'll spread word that there's going to be interesting conversation at the sheriff's office in about an hour. Might get you some witnesses. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This could still go sideways in about 15 different ways. Hazel turned to Clara. Come on, little miss. Let's find you some cookies and maybe a book while the adults do stupid things. Clara looked back at her mother one more time before following Hazel inside. Evelyn watched until the door closed, her expression carefully neutral. She'll be fine, Elias said. I know. Doesn't make leaving her easier. They rode into Dry Creek proper shortly after noon. The town wasn't much, maybe 40 buildings scattered along a main street that turned to mud whenever it rained, but it was civilization of a sort, and today it felt like walking onto a stage with an audience waiting. Elias saw Victor's men first, 2 outside the saloon exactly like Hazel had said, another leaning against the general store. They straightened when they spotted Evelyn, hands moving toward weapons before thinking better of it, in broad daylight. They're not going to try anything here, Jonah murmured. Too many witnesses. Unless Victor orders it. Even then, shooting a woman in the middle of town is bad business, tends to make people angry. They tied their horses outside the sheriff's office. Elias kept his hand near his pistol, watching windows and doorways while Evelyn climbed the steps and pushed inside. Sheriff Morton looked up from his desk, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a walrus mustache and tired eyes. He took in Evelyn's determined expression, Elias's armed presence, and Jonah's dangerous calm, and sighed. This going to be one of those days? Probably, Evelyn said. My name is Evelyn Crow. I need to report attempted kidnapping and assault. Morton's eyes narrowed. Crow? As in, recently married to Elias Crow. That's right. 2 nights ago, 7 men attacked my husband's cabin attempting to abduct me and my daughter. 2 were killed, 1 wounded. The rest fled. You got proof of this? Elias dropped Pike's documents on the desk. Taken off one of the attackers, shows they were hired by Victor Hale of Denver to retrieve his sister-in-law and niece by any means necessary. No legal warrant, no proper custody transfer, just money and violence. Morton picked up the papers, reading slowly. His expression didn't change, but his knuckles went white around the pages. Victor Hale's staying at Miller's. Rich man from Denver says he's got legal custody of a child that was kidnapped by an unstable woman. That's what he wants people to believe, Evelyn said. The truth is, my late husband left his fortune to our daughter in trust. Victor wants control of that fortune, so he bribed officials to declare me unfit. When I refused to hand over Clara, I fled. He's been hunting me ever since. That's quite an accusation. It's quite a crime. Evelyn leaned forward. Sheriff, I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to ask questions, to look at those documents and wonder why a man with legitimate legal claims needs to hire gunmen, to consider why a concerned uncle would order violence against his own family. She's got a point, Jonah added. Legal custody don't usually involve midnight raids and gunfights. Morton set the papers down carefully. Mrs. Crow, I appreciate your position, but this is complicated. You're talking about charges against a man with resources and connections. That requires evidence beyond some papers that might or might not be genuine. What if I could get you more evidence? Evelyn asked. Letters from my late husband detailing his brother's greed. Medical records showing I was never diagnosed with anything until Victor started paying doctors. Financial documents proving the inheritance Victor's after. You have all that? I know where it is. Denver. In a bank vault my husband maintained separately from his business accounts. He didn't trust Victor even when he was alive. Told me if anything ever happened, the evidence I'd need was there. Morton leaned back in his chair. So you want me to what? Ride to Denver and retrieve documents that may or may not exist from a bank that may or may not release them? No, I want you to delay Victor's custody claim until I can retrieve them myself. A temporary injunction preventing him from taking Clara while the matter is investigated properly. On what grounds? On the grounds that I'm now a married woman with a legal homestead, which changes custody jurisdiction. On the grounds that Victor has demonstrated violent intent through his hired men. On the grounds that a 5-year-old girl deserves to have her mother's claims heard before being handed to a man who sees her as nothing but money. The office had gone very quiet. Morton studied Evelyn with new attention, reassessing her the way Elias had done multiple times now. You're not what I expected, the sheriff said finally. Nobody ever is. Usually works in my favor. A knock at the door interrupted them. Morton called, "Come in!" and Reverend Walsh entered, followed by Hazel and 3 other townspeople Elias recognized vaguely. Heard there was interesting conversation happening, Walsh said. Thought we'd witness it officially. Morton's eyes narrowed. Hazel, you organizing a mob? Just concerned citizens. We heard about the attack on the Crow homestead. Heard Victor Hale might have had something to do with it. Seemed like something worth paying attention to. One of the other townspeople, a woman named Margaret, who ran the boarding house opposite Miller's, stepped forward. Sheriff, I've been watching Victor Hale for 2 weeks now. He's got men coming and going at all hours. Heard gunshots being cleaned late at night. Saw him pay Luther Cass a stack of bills thick as my wrist just yesterday morning. That don't seem like normal custody behavior to me. Me neither, added the blacksmith, a mountain of a man named Garrett. Luther came through my shop night before last buying ammunition. Said he had a job that was going to get messy. When I asked what kind of job, he said the kind that pays enough to not ask questions. Morton's expression had shifted from annoyed to thoughtful. Anyone else got observations to share? More people spoke up. The baker who'd sold provisions to Victor's men, the stable master who'd noticed their horses being readied for night riding, the doctor who'd been asked to prepare for potential wounded. None of it was damning individually, but together it painted a picture. Victor Hale had come to Dry Creek planning violence, and the town had noticed. All right, Morton said when the testimonies wound down. I can see there's cause for concern. Mrs. Crow, I'll file a temporary injunction preventing custody transfer until a proper hearing can be arranged. But, he held up a hand as Evelyn started to thank him, that just buys time. You'll still need to prove your claims eventually. A few documents from dead gunmen and town gossip won't hold up against lawyers. I understand. I just need enough time to get to Denver and back with real evidence. How long? Evelyn looked at Elias. He did the math. 2 weeks there, assuming good weather and no complications. 2 weeks back. Time in Denver to access the vault, gather documents, maybe find witnesses. A month, he said. Maybe 6 weeks to be safe. Winter's coming hard. That's a dangerous trip. No more dangerous than staying here waiting for Victor's next attack. Morton drummed his fingers on his desk. And the child? Clara, is it? Stays here, Evelyn said firmly, with people I trust in a place Victor can't reach. I won't risk her on a journey like that. That's giving him exactly what he wants. You'd leave, he could argue, abandonment. Not if I'm traveling with my husband on legal business with an established return date. That's not abandonment, that's responsible planning. The sheriff looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't find the angle. Fine, I'll file the injunction today. That gives you legal cover for about 60 days before someone higher up starts asking questions. Use that time well. We will. Evelyn stood and extended her hand. Morton shook it, surprise flickering across his face at her firm grip. One more thing, the sheriff said, as they turned to leave. Victor's not going to take this quietly. He's used to buying what he wants. When he can't, he tends to get creative. Let him get creative. I'm done being afraid. They emerged from the office into afternoon sunlight. A small crowd had gathered. Word had spread fast about the confrontation. Elias saw people watching from storefronts and windows, curiosity mixed with something that might have been sympathy. Well, Jonah said quietly, we've officially made this public, no going back now. Good, Evelyn replied. I want it public. I want Victor to understand he can't just make me disappear. As if summoned by his name, Victor Hale himself appeared at the end of the street. He was exactly what Elias expected. Tall, well-dressed, moving with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Probably mid-40s, with the kind of face that would have been handsome if it wasn't so cold. Two of his men flanked him, hands near weapons, but not drawing. Not yet. Evelyn? Victor called across the space between them. His voice was cultured, almost warm. It made Elias's skin crawl. How wonderful to see you. You look well, much better than the last time we spoke. Evelyn's spine straightened. Victor? I heard the most amusing rumor. Something about you getting married? To a frontier hermit? Surely that's not true. It's completely true. His name is Elias Crow, and he's my husband. Victor's eyes shifted to Elias, assessing and dismissing in the same glance. How pragmatic, though I suppose desperate times call for desperate measures. He took a few steps closer. People moved out of his way. Where's Clara? I'd like to see my niece. Clara is with people who actually care about her well-being, unlike her mother, who dragged her halfway across the frontier in winter. Victor's smile never reached his eyes. Really, Evelyn, this has gone on long enough. You're unwell, you need help. Clara needs stability. Let me take care of both of you. The way you tried to take care of us 2 nights ago, with hired guns and violence? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Evelyn pulled out Pike's documents. These say different. They detail exactly how you hired men to abduct me and Clara by any means necessary. 2 of those men are dead now, Victor. How many more are you willing to sacrifice? Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Anger, maybe, or calculation. Those documents are forgeries. Attempts to slander a grieving family member who only wants to help. Sheriff Morton doesn't think so. He's filed an injunction preventing any custody transfer until a proper investigation can be completed. Now Victor's smile slipped. On what grounds? On the grounds that your entire claim is built on lies and bribery. On the grounds that I'm not the unstable widow you painted me as. On the grounds that Clara deserves better than an uncle who sees her as money. The street had gone very quiet. Everyone was watching now, this confrontation playing out in public exactly as Evelyn had planned. Victor took another step forward, his men tensed. So did Jonah, hand dropping to his pistol. You're making a mistake, Victor said softly. I've been patient, understanding. But patience has limits, Evelyn. You can't win this fight. I don't have to win. I just have to survive long enough to prove you're a liar and a thief. I'm getting good at surviving. Are you? 'Cause from where I stand, you're trapped in a small town with limited resources, married to a man you barely know, separated from your daughter, with no legal standing and no future. Victor's voice carried across the streets, meant for the watching crowd. This is what mental instability looks like, ladies and gentlemen. A woman so deluded she thinks marriage to a stranger will save her from her own poor decisions. The only poor decision I made was trusting you after Thomas died, Evelyn shot back, but I learned from my mistakes, which is why you'll never get Clara. Not through courts, not through violence, not ever. Victor's mask finally cracked. The cultured warmth vanished, replaced by something cold and hungry. We'll see about that. He turned and walked back toward Miller's boarding house, his men following. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring among themselves. Elias let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. That went better than expected. Or worse, Jonah muttered. You just humiliated him in front of witnesses. Men like that don't forget. Good, Evelyn said. I want him angry. Angry people make mistakes. They collected Clara from Hazel's and returned to the cabin as sunset painted the mountains gold and red. The ride back was tense, everyone watching for ambush, but the trails stayed empty. Either Victor was regrouping or he was planning something that didn't involve immediate violence. Clara ran to her mother the moment they arrived, and Evelyn held her like she'd been gone for days instead of hours. Did you win? Clara asked. We survived. Sometimes that's the same thing. That night, Elias stood watch while Jonah slept, and Evelyn put Clara to bed in the small room he'd built. Through the thin walls, he could hear her singing something soft and low. A lullaby, maybe, or just comfort made sound. His cabin had never felt more like a home, which terrified him almost as much as Victor's threats. Around midnight, Evelyn emerged and found him at the window. Can't sleep? She asked. Someone needs to watch. Jonah can watch. You need rest. I'm fine. She sat in the chair across from him. We're really doing this, aren't we? Going to Denver, leaving Clara here, trusting that people we barely know will protect her while we're gone. Unless you've got a better plan? I don't, which is what scares me. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Thank you for today, for standing with me when you could have stayed out of it. I'm your husband. That's what husbands do. On paper, maybe, but you meant it when you stood there in front of Victor and the whole town, I could tell. Elias didn't know how to respond to that. She was right. Somewhere between the wedding and the gunfight and watching her confront Victor with nothing but courage and stolen documents, this had stopped being just a practical arrangement. He cared what happened to her. And to Clara, that was dangerous in ways he wasn't ready to examine. Get some sleep, he said instead. We've got a lot of planning to do before we can leave for Denver. Evelyn stood but paused at the door to her room. Elias? That promise you made Clara about coming back? What about it? Did you mean it? He looked at her. This woman who'd walked 500 miles through hell to save her daughter, who'd married a stranger and confronted her demon in the same week, who somehow made his cold cabin feel warm again. Yeah, he said, I meant it. She smiled, small and genuine, and disappeared into her room. Elias turned back to the window, watching darkness and thinking about promises he'd never expected to make, and a future that looked nothing like the isolation he'd planned. Outside, snow began to fall. Winter was here, and with it, everything that came next. They left for Denver 3 days later, in the gray hour before dawn, when the world felt suspended between night and possibility. Clara cried when they said goodbye, clutching her wooden horse so tightly her knuckles went white, but she didn't beg them to stay. Some children learned too young that begging changed nothing. Hazel took the girl's hand with surprising gentleness. "We'll be fine here. I've survived worse than Victor Hale, and so will she. You just come back with what you need to bury him." Evelyn kissed Clara's forehead one more time, whispered something Elias couldn't hear, then forced herself to turn away before she could change her mind. They rode south while the sky turned from black to purple to pale winter blue, leaving behind everything that mattered to chase evidence that might not even exist anymore. The journey to Denver took 16 days instead of the 14 Elias had estimated. A storm caught them in the high passes, forcing them to shelter in an abandoned mining camp for 2 nights, while winds tried to tear the world apart. They ran low on supplies outside Colorado Springs and had to trade Evelyn's last piece of jewelry, a silver bracelet her mother had given her, for enough food to make it the rest of the way. But it was the quiet moments that stuck with Elias. Evenings around small fires where Evelyn talked about her life before Victor's greed had poisoned everything, how she'd met Thomas at a charity function, charmed by his earnestness even though she'd known from the start that marriage to him would mean giving up parts of herself, how Clara had been born early, small and fragile, and Evelyn had spent 3 weeks barely sleeping, terrified of losing her. Thomas loved her, Evelyn said one night, staring into the flames, in his way, but he loved his business more, loved the idea of legacy and empire. I think that's why he left everything to Clara, not to spite Victor, but because he genuinely believed building something meant more than the people you built it with. You think different? I know different. I'd burn every dollar of that inheritance if it meant keeping Clara safe and free. Money's just paper. Family's what matters. She looked at him across the fire. You understand that. You wouldn't have done any of this if you didn't. Elias poked at the coals, uncomfortable with the observation. I just didn't want to watch a kid die because adults couldn't get their act together. It's more than that. You could have helped us once and sent us on our way, could have married me and kept emotional distance. But you're here 2 weeks from home, risking everything for people who aren't your blood. She paused. Why? That question again. The same one she'd asked him half a dozen times in different ways, and Elias still wasn't sure he had a good answer. Or maybe he did, but admitting it meant acknowledging things he'd buried for 6 years. I had a family once, he said slowly. Sarah and Jamie, lost them both to fever when Jamie was 6. I was an army medic. I'd kept men alive through bullets and infection and every kind of trauma war throws at you. But I couldn't save my own son. The words hurt coming out, like pulling arrows from old wounds. After they died, I stopped caring about much of anything. Figured if I couldn't protect what mattered most, what was the point of protecting anything? But you did protect us. Yeah, and I still don't know if that was smart or stupid, or just me being too stubborn to let history repeat itself. Elias met her eyes across the flames. Maybe I needed to prove to myself I wasn't completely useless. Or maybe I just heard Clara screaming in that storm and couldn't walk away because somewhere, in some other version of things, maybe someone heard Jamie and helped him. Evelyn was quiet for a long time. You're not useless, Elias. You're about the least useless person I've ever met. Tell that to the graves I left in Montana. Your wife and son didn't die because you were useless. They died because sometimes sickness wins and medicine fails and the world is cruel for no good reason. She leaned forward. But Clara's alive because you weren't useless. I'm alive. That has to count for something. Does it? It does to us. They sat in silence after that, listening to wind move through pine trees and watching embers dance. Elias thought about Sarah, about Jamie, about all the ways grief had carved him hollow. But he also thought about Clara's laugh and Evelyn's steel-wrapped courage and the strange sense of purpose that had crept back into his days. Maybe you couldn't fix the past, maybe graves stayed graves no matter how many people you save afterward, but maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the point was just choosing to care again, even knowing it could all end in more loss and heartbreak. Maybe that choice was what separated living from just not dying. Denver rose from the plains like a promise of civilization after weeks in the wilderness, bigger than Elias remembered, louder, thick, with the smell of coal smoke and horses, and too many people crammed into too little space. They found a modest hotel on the edge of the business district and paid for 3 nights, enough time to handle the bank and gather evidence, hopefully without attracting Victor's attention. That hope lasted approximately 4 hours. Elias was in the hotel room cleaning his rifle when someone knocked. He checked through the peephole and saw a slim man in an expensive suit, hands visible and empty. "Mr. Crow? My name is Jonathan Pierce. I'm an attorney. I'd like to speak with you and Mrs. Crow about a delicate matter." Elias opened the door but didn't lower his weapon. "We're not interested in whatever Victor's paying you to sell." Pierce's eyebrows rose. "I don't work for Victor Hale. I work for the Colorado Bar Association's Ethics Committee. May I come in?" That was unexpected enough that Elias stepped aside. Pierce entered, glanced at Evelyn, who'd emerged from the adjacent room, and settled into the room's single chair with the ease of someone comfortable anywhere. "Mrs. Crow? Or should I say Mrs. Hale? I'm never quite sure which name applies in these situations." "Crow," Evelyn said firmly. "I'm legally married now." "So I've heard. Frontier marriage, filed in Dry Creek, Montana territory. Very resourceful." Pierce pulled out a folder. "I'm here because certain irregularities have come to my attention regarding the custody case between yourself and Victor Hale. Irregularities that suggest possible professional misconduct by multiple attorneys involved." "What kind of misconduct?" "The kind where doctors are paid to diagnose conditions that don't exist. Judges receive donations right before issuing favorable rulings, and legal documents contain statements that were never actually made by the people supposedly making them." Pierce's expression was neutral, but his voice carried an edge. "The kind of misconduct that makes the entire legal profession look corrupt." Elias lowered his rifle slightly. "You're saying you believe her?" "I'm saying I've seen the preliminary evidence and it raises substantial questions. Questions I'd like answers to before they become public scandal." He looked at Evelyn. "I understand you're here to access documents your late husband left in a bank vault, documents that might prove Victor Hale orchestrated this custody case through fraudulent means. How do you know that?" "'Cause I've been investigating Victor for 3 months now. He's done this before, used the legal system to steal from people who couldn't fight back. Usually it's business rivals or partners he wants to eliminate. This time it's family, which makes it more personal, but no less illegal." Pierce leaned forward. "If you have evidence, I can help you present it properly. Make sure it's admissible, make sure the right people see it, make sure Victor can't make it disappear." "Why would you help us?" "Because I'm tired of watching rich men buy justice like it's merchandise. And because if Victor gets away with this, he'll do it again." Pierce smiled thinly. "Plus, the ethics committee is very interested in making examples of attorneys who enable this kind of fraud. Helping you helps us." Evelyn looked at Elias. He shrugged. This wasn't his expertise. She turned back to Pierce. "What do you need from us?" "Access to those documents, sworn testimony about what happened in Denver before you fled, names of the doctors and officials Victor bribed." Pierce pulled out papers. "I've already drafted preliminary motions. If your evidence supports your claims, I can have Victor's custody case thrown out within a week. Possibly have criminal charges filed. And if the evidence doesn't support our claims, then you're exactly what Victor says you are, and I'll have wasted everyone's time. But I don't think that's the case. People who are actually unstable don't organize successful escapes, secure marriages for legal protection, and travel 1,000 miles in winter to gather proof. They just break. I almost did, Evelyn admitted quietly. Break, I mean. There were nights during the journey when I thought about giving up, thought Clara would be better off with someone stable, even if that someone was Victor. But you didn't give up. No, because giving up meant Clara growing up thinking her mother abandoned her, meant teaching her that powerful men always win and fighting back is pointless. Evelyn straightened her spine. I couldn't let that be her lesson, so I kept going. Pierce nodded slowly. That's good. Remember that conviction. You're going to need it when we face Victor in court. They went to the bank the next morning, Evelyn, Elias, and Pierce, who insisted on being present for evidentiary purposes. The bank manager was skeptical at first, questioning whether Evelyn had the authority to access her deceased husband's vault. But the marriage certificate to Thomas, the death certificate, and Pierce's legal arguments eventually convinced him. The vault was smaller than Elias expected, just a metal box in a wall of metal boxes, but what it contained was devastating. Letters from Thomas to Evelyn, written in the months before his death, expressing concern about Victor's increasing hostility and greed. Financial records showing Victor had been embezzling from the company for years. A separate will, never filed, that explicitly stated Victor should have no access to Clara or her inheritance under any circumstances. Medical reports from 3 different doctors certifying Evelyn's sound mental health, dated just weeks before Victor's paid doctors claimed otherwise, and a letter addressed to Clara to be opened on her 18th birthday where Thomas apologized for putting business before family and begged her not to make the same mistakes. Evelyn read that last letter with tears streaming down her face. He knew, she whispered. He knew he was dying, and he knew what Victor would try to do. Then why didn't he stop it? Elias asked. Because he thought lawyers and documents would be enough. He didn't understand that money could buy anything, including justice. She carefully refolded the letter. But he gave me the tools to fight back. That's something. Pierce was cataloging everything, making notes, his expression growing grimmer with each document. This is better than I hoped. With these, we can not only defeat Victor's custody claim, we can likely have him prosecuted for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. He's going to prison, Mrs. Crow. I don't care about prison. I just want Clara safe. You'll have both. They returned to the hotel to find a message waiting. Victor wanted to meet. Neutral location, no weapons, just conversation. The note was signed with a flourish that managed to look both elegant and threatening. It's a trap, Elias said immediately. Maybe, Pierce agreed, but it's also an opportunity. If we can get Victor to say anything incriminating in front of witnesses, it strengthens our case. Or he has us killed. In the middle of Denver? That would be remarkably stupid, even for him. Evelyn was reading the note. He knows we found something. Otherwise, why reach out now? He's trying to negotiate before we can use whatever we have against him. Which means he's scared, Pierce said. Scared men make offers. Let's hear what he's willing to give up. They met that evening at a restaurant downtown, the kind of place where wealthy men made deals over steak and whiskey while pretending they were civilized. Victor was already there, sitting alone at a corner table, looking every inch the concerned relative rather than the predator he actually was. Evelyn, Mr. Crow, how kind of you to come? Victor gestured at empty chairs. Please sit. I took the liberty of ordering wine. "We're not here for wine," Evelyn said, but she sat. Elias positioned himself where he could watch both Victor and the door. "No, I suppose you're not." Victor studied her with something that might have been genuine curiosity. "You've changed. When you left Denver, you were a frightened widow, barely holding yourself together. Now, you're..." He searched for words. "Formidable. I underestimated you. I admit that freely." "Is that an apology?" "It's an observation. Though if you'd like an apology, I can provide one. I handled this situation poorly. Let anger and frustration drive decisions that should have been made with cooler heads." Victor sipped his wine. "I'd like to propose a solution that benefits everyone involved." "I'm listening." "You keep Clara. I withdraw all custody claims and legal challenges. In exchange, you transfer control of Thomas's company to me. The inheritance stays in trust for Clara, but I manage the business interests until she comes of age." Evelyn laughed, short and bitter. "You want me to hand you everything Thomas built in exchange for letting me keep my own daughter? That's your offer? It's more than fair. The company was always going to be mine." Thomas knew that. He just got sentimental at the end, thinking, "A child could run a shipping empire. Be realistic, Evelyn. You don't want to run a business. You want to raise Clara in peace. This gives you that. By letting you steal her inheritance, by letting me preserve what Thomas built, while you do what you actually care about, being a mother." Victor leaned forward. "Think practically. You've made your points. You've proven you can't be bullied, but now it's time to be smart. Take this offer. Go back to Montana. Live your life. Let Clara grow up somewhere. She won't remember any of this ugliness." It was a good offer, objectively. Security for Clara, peace for Evelyn, an end to the running and fighting and fear. A few years ago, Evelyn might have taken it, might have convinced herself that compromise was wisdom, but she'd walked 500 miles through winter. She'd married a stranger and confronted hired guns and traveled back to the city that had tried to destroy her. She'd found documents proving every accusation she'd ever made and secured an attorney willing to fight. She wasn't the same woman who'd fled Denver 3 months ago. "No," Evelyn said simply. Victor blinked. "No? No, I'm not giving you anything. Not the company, not Clara's inheritance, not one single dollar of what Thomas left to his daughter." She stood. "I'm taking you to court, Victor. I'm going to show everyone exactly what you are. A thief and a liar who tried to steal from a child. And when I'm done, you'll be lucky if the only thing you lose is your freedom." Victor's mask finally cracked completely. The cultured warmth vanished, replaced by naked fury. "You stupid woman. Do you have any idea what I can do to you? The connections I have, the people who owe me favors? Probably. But I've got something better than connections." Evelyn smiled. "I've got the truth and evidence and an attorney from the Bar Association's ethics committee who's very interested in how you've been corrupting the legal system." Victor's eyes found Pierce, who'd been sitting quietly at the next table over. Recognition and understanding flashed across his face, followed by something that might have been fear. "You're making a terrible mistake," Victor said quietly. "No. The terrible mistake was trusting you after Thomas died. Everything since then has just been correcting that error." Evelyn turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Victor? Those men you sent to kill me and my husband? 2 of them are dead, and the 3rd one talked. Sheriff Morton has statements. So your legal problems aren't limited to fraud and embezzlement. You might want to find yourself a very good attorney." She walked out with Elias beside her, leaving Victor sitting alone with his expensive wine and collapsing empire. On the street, Evelyn started shaking. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation drained away all at once, leaving her unsteady. Elias caught her elbow, holding her upright until she found her balance. "You all right?" "I told him no," she said, wonder in her voice. "I had a chance to end this quietly, and I told him no." Seemed like the right call to me. It was. It absolutely was. She looked up at him, eyes bright. "For the first time in my life, I chose the hard, right thing over the easy, wrong thing, and it felt amazing." Pierce joined them, looking pleased. "That went better than expected." He didn't even try to deny anything, just moved straight to bargaining. Shows he knows how weak his position is. "What happens now?" Elias asked. "Now we file motions, present evidence, and watch Victor's case collapse. Judge Whitmore is scheduled to arrive in Dry Creek next week for circuit court. If we time this right, we can have a hearing there instead of Denver. Neutral ground, away from Victor's influence. Can you make that happen?" "I can try. Having the case heard in frontier territory instead of Colorado. District court works in our favor. Frontier judges tend to be less impressed by money and more interested in facts." Pierce tipped his hat. "I'll handle the legal work. You two should head back to Montana. Make sure your daughter is safe and prepare for testimony." They left Denver the next morning, carrying copies of every document from Thomas's vault and a cautious hope that maybe, finally, this nightmare was ending. The journey back took 15 days, one day faster than the trip out, fueled by urgency to see Clara again. When they rode into Dry Creek, Hazel was waiting outside the post office with Clara sitting on the steps beside her, both of them wrapped in blankets against the cold. Clara saw them first and ran, ignoring the snow and her mother's shouted warning to be careful, launching herself at Evelyn with enough force to nearly knock her from the saddle. "You came back! You came back! You came back! You came back!" "I told you I would." Evelyn held her daughter like she might disappear if she let go. "I promised, remember?" "I know, but I was still scared." Clara pulled back just enough to look at her mother's face. "Did you find what you needed?" "We found everything. More than enough." "Does that mean we won?" "Not yet, but soon." Judge Harold Whitmore arrived in Dry Creek on a gray March morning when the snow was finally starting to melt and the first hints of spring touched the air. He was a small, precise man who'd spent 40 years dispensing justice across the Montana Territory with a reputation for being immune to bribes and unmoved by sob stories. The hearing was held in the schoolhouse, the only building large enough to accommodate everyone who wanted to attend. It seemed half the town had shown up, curious about the custody case that had brought gunfights and city lawyers to their quiet settlement. Victor sat on one side with two attorneys from Denver, looking confident despite everything. Evelyn sat on the other with Pierce, Elias beside her in his only decent shirt, and Clara in Hazel's care in the back row. Whitmore called the hearing to order and listened while both sides presented their cases. Victor's attorneys painted a picture of a grieving brother-in-law trying to save his niece from an unstable mother who'd fled lawful custody and resorted to vigilante violence. They had custody papers, testimonies from Denver officials, and medical reports about Evelyn's supposed mental illness. Then Pierce stood up and methodically destroyed every claim. He presented Thomas's letters proving Victor had been embezzling and showing his concern about his brother's greed. He showed medical reports from before Victor's influence, certifying Evelyn's sound mental health. He walked through financial documents proving the inheritance Victor claimed to be protecting was one he'd been stealing from for years. And he presented statements from Luther Cass, who'd been arrested, trying to leave the territory, detailing exactly how Victor had hired men to kidnap Evelyn and Clara, using violence if necessary. Victor's attorneys tried to object, to claim the documents were fake or the testimony unreliable, but each time Pierce had corroborating evidence. He'd spent the last month building an airtight case, and it showed. When Pierce finally sat down, the schoolhouse was silent. Whitmore reviewed the evidence for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Finally, he looked up. Mr. Hale, I've presided over custody cases for 4 decades. I've seen grieving relatives fight over children, seen bitter divorces and family feuds, but I've rarely seen anything as nakedly mercenary as what you've attempted here. His voice was flat, carrying the weight of absolute authority. You didn't want custody of your niece to protect her, you wanted control of her inheritance. And when legal methods failed, you resorted to bribery, fraud, and violence. Victor started to speak, but Whitmore cut him off. I'm not finished, Mrs. Crow. You made mistakes in how you handled this situation. Fleeing jurisdiction was illegal, but it was also understandable given the corruption you were facing. And you've since demonstrated nothing but determination to protect your daughter and willingness to face legal scrutiny. He shuffled papers. Therefore, I rule as follows. Full custody of Clara Hale Crow is awarded to her mother, Evelyn Crow. All previous custody orders are vacated and expunged. Victor Hale is permanently enjoined from pursuing custody or contact with the minor child. Evelyn made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. Elias found her hand and squeezed it. Furthermore, Whitmore continued, I'm referring this case to federal authorities for investigation of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Mr. Hale, you're remanded to custody pending transfer to Denver for prosecution. Victor's face went white. His attorneys were already whispering urgently, probably calculating appeal options, but it was over and everyone knew it. Sheriff Morton stepped forward with handcuffs. Victor allowed himself to be cuffed without resistance, too shocked to fight. As they led him from the schoolhouse, he looked at Evelyn one last time. You've destroyed everything Thomas built, he said. No, Evelyn replied. I saved what mattered. You just never understood the difference. Then he was gone, escorted to a cell where he'd wait for federal marshals. And the schoolhouse erupted in conversation. People surrounded Evelyn, offering congratulations and sympathy in equal measure. Clara pushed through the crowd and wrapped herself around her mother's waist. Does this mean we can stay? She asked. Stay in Montana with Elias and not run anymore? Yeah, sweetheart, we can stay. Forever? Evelyn looked at Elias. He nodded slightly. Forever, she confirmed. The celebration lasted most of the day. Someone produced whiskey, someone else brought food, and the schoolhouse turned into an impromptu party. Elias endured about an hour of people congratulating him before escaping outside to breathe air that wasn't thick with bodies and noise. Jonah found him leaning against the building, watching sunset paint the mountains. You did good, the trapper said. Didn't do much. Evelyn did the heavy lifting. You kept her alive long enough to fight. That's not nothing. Jonah was quiet for a moment. You planning to stay married, or was that just practical until the custody thing was settled? Elias had been asking himself the same question for weeks. The marriage had started as convenience, legal protection, masquerading as commitment. But somewhere between building Evelyn her own room and riding 1,000 miles to help her gather evidence and standing beside her while she faced down the man who tried to destroy her, it had become something else, something he wasn't sure he knew how to name. Don't know yet, he admitted. You should figure it out. Woman like that doesn't come around often. Be ashamed to lose her because you're too stubborn to admit you care. I'm not. Yeah, you are. But that's fine. Just don't wait so long that you miss your chance. Jonah clapped him on the shoulder and headed back inside. Elias stood there alone, thinking about chances and choices and all the ways life kept forcing you to decide between hiding and risking everything. The door opened behind him. Evelyn stepped out, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cooling air. Too loud in there? She asked. Something like that. She joined him against the wall, both of them watching the sun sink behind the peaks. Thank you for everything. I know I keep saying it, but I don't think you understand how much you don't have to keep thanking me. I know, but I want to. She was quiet for a moment. Pierce asked me what I'm planning to do now, with the company, with Clara's inheritance, with everything. What did you tell him? That I don't know. The company should probably be sold. I don't want to run it from Montana, and I don't want to move back to Denver. Clara's inheritance is hers, held in trust until she's old enough to decide what to do with it. As for me, she trailed off. What about you? I keep thinking about what you said once about surviving versus living, about how surviving was all you'd been doing since your wife and son died. She looked at him. I've been surviving for a long time too. First in a marriage that suffocated me, then running from Victor, then fighting for Clara's custody. But now that it's over, now that Clara's safe and we're not running anymore, I have to figure out what living actually looks like. You've got options now. Money, freedom, legal protection. You could go anywhere, do anything. I could. Evelyn's voice was soft. Or I could stay here, in Montana, on a homestead with a man who carved my daughter a wooden horse and married me to keep her safe and somehow made me feel more like myself than I've felt in years. Elias's chest went tight. That's not... We agreed this was practical, convenient, nothing more unless you decided different. I'm deciding different? She turned to face him fully. Elias, I know this started as a transaction, legal protection in exchange for partnership, but it became more than that, at least for me. You gave me freedom when you could have demanded control. You stood with me when you could have walked away. You kept every promise you made to Clara and to me. Her voice wavered slightly. So, I'm asking, do you want this marriage to be real? Not just legal, but real? Every instinct Elias had developed over 6 years of isolation screamed at him to deflect, to make a joke, to find some way to avoid answering honestly. But Evelyn had faced down Victor Hale with nothing but courage and evidence. The least he could do was match her honesty. I'm not easy to live with, he said. I'm used to being alone. I don't talk much. And I've got ghosts that don't go away just because I want them to. I've got my own ghosts, and I'm not exactly easy either. I'm stubborn, and I've got years of anger I'm still working through, and I'll probably wake up with nightmares about Victor for the rest of my life. She took his hand. But maybe 2 difficult people is better than 2 easy ones. Maybe we understand each other because we've both survived things that should have broken us. Maybe, Elias allowed. Is that a yes? He thought about his cabin, which had stopped feeling like a tomb and started feeling like home, about Clara's laugh and Evelyn's steel-wrapped determination, and the way he'd started waking up with something that felt dangerously close to hope. Yeah, he said. It's a yes. Evelyn smiled, genuine and bright and entirely unguarded, and kissed him. It wasn't their first kiss, but it was the first one that meant something beyond legal ceremony. The first one that promised a future instead of just survival. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. So what now? Now we go home. Build a life. Figure out what living looks like instead of just surviving. Sounds good to me. Spring came to Montana slowly, the way it always did in the mountains. Snow melted into rivers that rushed down valleys, carrying winter away. The cabin that had housed one grieving hermit expanded to accommodate a family. Elias added a proper room for Clara, built a larger kitchen, fixed the leaky roof that had been bothering him for years but hadn't seemed worth the effort when he was alone. Evelyn sold Thomas's company to a competitor for enough money that Clara's trust fund would see her through college and beyond. She kept their small house in Denver as rental property, but made it clear she had no intention of ever living there again. Montana was home now, with its harsh winters and isolated beauty and community that had accepted them despite everything. Clara thrived. She helped Hazel at the post office, learned to ride from Jonah, and collected stories from every traveler who passed through Dry Creek. The nightmares faded, replaced by dreams of normal things, horses and friends, and all the mundane hopes of childhood. One evening in late May, Elias found her planting sunflower seeds along the cabin's south wall. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Mama said I could plant a garden. Sunflowers first, then maybe vegetables." Clara patted dirt carefully over each seed. She said gardens mean you're planning to stay somewhere, that you're making it yours. "Your mama's right." Clara looked up at him with those serious eyes that still sometimes seemed too old for her face. "Are you happy we stayed? That Mama decided to make the marriage real?" Elias considered the question. Happy wasn't a word he'd have used for himself in years. Contentment, maybe, purpose, the quiet satisfaction of building something worth keeping instead of just existing day to day. But watching Clara plant seeds in soil that had been frozen solid 4 months ago, listening to Evelyn singing something off-key while she cooked dinner, feeling the weight of promises kept and a future that looked nothing like the isolation he'd planned. "Yeah, kid, I'm happy." Clara beamed and went back to her planting. Elias stood there for a while, watching the sun sink toward the mountains, thinking about graves and second chances and all the ways life surprised you when you stopped running from it. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "Dinner's ready. And before you ask, no, I didn't burn it this time. Only asked once. You asked 3 times, I counted." But she was smiling. "Come on, let's eat while it's hot." They gathered around the table, Elias, Evelyn, Clara, and Jonah, who'd shown up earlier, claiming he was just passing through, but really came by most nights now. Hazel joined them sometimes, and Reverend Walsh, and gradually the cabin that had been built for solitude became a place where community happened. Later, after Clara was asleep and Jonah had headed back to his own camp, Elias and Evelyn sat on the porch watching stars emerge above the mountains. "You think Victor's in prison yet?" Evelyn asked. "Probably. Federal marshals don't waste time." Elias didn't particularly care. Victor had stopped mattering the moment Whitmore's ruling came down. "You worried about him coming back?" "No, for the first time in months, I'm not worried about anything." She leaned against him, comfortable in a way that still surprised him sometimes. "I keep waiting for the fear to come back, for the panic, the constant looking over my shoulder. But it's just gone. That's called peace." "Is it? I wouldn't know. Haven't felt it in years." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you think Clara will remember all of this? The running, the fear, the violence?" "Some of it, probably, but kids are resilient. She'll remember the important parts, that you fought for her, that you never gave up, that you built her a safe place to grow." Elias watched the stars. "That's a better legacy than most kids get." "I hope so. I just want her to grow up knowing she's loved, that she's worth fighting for, that she doesn't have to be perfect or convenient or quiet to deserve happiness. She'll know. You're teaching her every day just by being yourself." Evelyn laughed softly. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I just finally stopped being stupid." "What changed?" Elias thought about that. "I heard a kid screaming in a storm and decided maybe I didn't want to be dead inside anymore. Everything else just followed from that." "Best decision you ever made?" "Second best." He pulled her closer. "First best was saying yes when you asked if I wanted this marriage to be real." "Flatterer. Just honest." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the night deepen and listening to the sounds of the frontier settling down around them. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, wind moved through the pines, the river that ran past the cabin murmured its endless song. It wasn't a perfect life. There would be hard winters and lean times and all the struggles that came with frontier living. Evelyn would probably always carry scars from what Victor had put her through. Elias would always miss Sarah and Jamie. Clara would grow up with memories of fear alongside the safety they'd built. But perfect had never been the goal. Survival had been the goal. And then something better than survival. A life built from choices instead of circumstances. From standing together instead of falling apart. From deciding that caring about people was worth the risk of losing them. The mountains that had once been Elias's hiding place had become the first place any of them truly belonged. Not because they were easy or gentle or forgiving, but because they didn't demand you be anything other than what you were. And what they were, the strange family built from storm and desperation and unexpected courage, was enough, more than enough. It was everything. It